Good morning. Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. It is Saturday morning. What are we up to? March the 9th? Is that right? Yes, my goodness. So this will be this is part 10 of 12 with Professor Ed McCray with our Disney history that one-man army, is saving and preserving right here for you. For me, and for whoever finds these videos going forward. It's very important that we preserve real history and document it and really reveal the facts that have been buried, sometimes out of laziness, sometimes out of accident, and sometimes very maliciously. And in this case, there is a narrative in our world, and things that go against that general narrative, they tend to get buried. And the whole purpose of this series, this playlist here on this YouTube channel, is to document this stuff so that it exists somewhere. So that's why Ed has produced these series. He's put a lot of time, a lot of effort into these. I'm so grateful for him and what he has done. And I'm grateful for you for joining us here and being a part of this. And it'll be up to you to share this information with those that need to hear this. A couple quick programming notes. As I said, we have a couple more parts. So today's title is, I think, live action, film and TV. Ed's going to go through all of that. Next week, part 11, it's going to be more Disney legends. And then part 12, when we wrap this up, it'll be remembering Walt Disney and preserving Walt Disney. And he'll go through some very important information there in part 12 coming up on March 23rd. After that, I'm not so sure what we're going to do with the Saturday space. That is TBD. I have a couple of things on the horizon. Don't know the air dates of those, but before I get all the details sorted out, I don't want to exactly say anything because I don't know when it's going to be, but some fun stuff coming up as well. Last programming note, every Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, we do a Friday live stream where I have a couple of guests join me. And coming up this coming Friday will be Jill Savage, my coworker from The Blaze, and Donnie Anthony. She's a local, how do we say that? She ran for Arlington mayor. That's who that is. But she does a lot of important stuff in local politics. Donnie Anthony will also be my guest. Jack Helmuth coming up the week after that. And then just a lot of fun people. I'm looking over here at the schedule. If you missed yesterday's live stream, it is available here. One of these playlists, right? The Friday live stream, a lot of fun with Brad from 5 Times August and my friend Toby McAvoy. Good day yesterday, if you want to check that out. All right, enough about all that fun stuff because we got Ed McCray. What up, sir? How are you? Good morning, man.
I'm fine. Good morning.
Yeah, all right, all the way from the wilds of Pennsylvania joining us here.
Yep. Disneyland North. The real Disneyland
North. Yeah. Do you ever get over to Hershey Park or anything like that?
I've been there a few times, a long time ago.
What are your impressions of that compared to something like Disney World, Disneyland?
Well, both of them, they're not what the founders founded. I mean, it would have been nice if a little bit of Milton Hershey was still there. And I think they closed the Chocolate World down recently.
Really?
Last couple of years. Yeah. You remember the Hershey chocolate, Hershey,
Well, the one thing that I recall was they had great roller coasters, and I'm not a roller coaster guy, but man, I loved the Hershey Park roller coasters. The one time that I visited there,
I'm not sure what's actually in the park anymore, but I always liked the Chocolate World one.
I'm not familiar. Okay, yeah,
you can see that was they set up a fake factory because they didn't want people to go in the real factory, and you could see all the candy made, but it wasn't real candy.
Okay, wow.
It was just a ride to go through, but it's not there anymore. They shut it down or something.
That's no good. Okay. Well, I mean, they're always changing our history, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you want to start today, sir?
Well, the thing with the ducks that I thought of after the show, I made a connection that no one's ever made before. Maybe the reason why the Disney ducks were so popular in Europe is because the Donald Duck was the most popular military insignia on the airplanes and things. So the Europeans might have associated that with their liberators in World War II. So that's why they adopted the Disney ducks, the American culture that came with that. And Hitler had banned Mickey Mouse in the early 1930s. He called him vermin and compared him to Jewish people. And so the Mickey wasn't around in Europe, for 15 years, whatever long that went. And
Oh, whoops. Keep
so, well,
talking.
that's okay.
I hit the wrong button.
So the
Sorry.
maybe that's the ducks
Trying to get the
symbolize
picture bigger.
American culture.
Okay.
But that was just
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. What now? Hold on a second. But what is this character doing today that's pretty nefarious, man?
I guess they made a video with him pushing woke stuff because there's people challenging Bob Iger on the board, and they have Ludwig von Drake telling them to vote against the guy and vote for Iger and all this stuff, and they've been pushing woke stuff, but the character was never right about anything. So I mean, he's holding a book there, child psychology. It probably has transing kids in it or something,
Do you think that they realize the irony in that he was always wrong about stuff?
Well, for a while he was a banned character because they said that he was based on a Nazi, Werner von Braun, he was based on Werner von Braun. That's true, but Werner von Braun worked with Walt on those Man in Space videos or films. So that's where the name came from. I mean, in the 70s, there was a character called Werner von Bear. He was a very famous scientist in the United States after the war. Project Paperclip and all that.
Yeah. All right. So where do you want to head next, sir?
I'll just go into that European film folder, and we'll just go through it. It's number 1.
Okay. Fire away.
Walt had always wanted to go into live action, and these are the first live action films that he worked on. He went into animation because the doors were closed to him in live action, and this was the first experiment, The Reluctant Dragon. It's sort of a documentary, but not really, because it's an entertainment film, but it's to show off the new studio he'd built.
I started watching that on your recommendation, and we ran out of time the other day, but I got to the part where it switches to color, and it's really it's fun. It's fun as they're walking around the studio. It's kind of like this, I don't know, this informal way to give you a tour of the studio, right? Really kind of show off the studio.
And all the people that are in it that are the employees or the real employees.
Yeah, I figured there were a lot of people that made cameos as he was making his tour that I probably, if I were alive at the time, this was made in 1941, I believe.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I figured that I bet I would recognize these people that are ducking in the shots and stuff like that.
And the reason that got made is because he didn't make money on Pinocchio and Fantasia, and they had put something out quickly.
Yeah.
There's 3 animated shorts in it, and one of them is storyboarded. Baby Weems is just storyboarded, but it's entertaining.
Yeah, and look for this, The Reluctant Dragon, y'all, because it's just cool because there's this scene where they're recording a cartoon, and today it's just a bunch of computers and buttons and stuff, and back then you had to coordinate live orchestras and sound effects and the way they created these sound effects. It's really fascinating to watch that, because they've got the stuff on the big screen and they're following along and doing the sound effects. It's really fun.
The guy that did the sound effects was Jimmy McDonald. We talked about him last week when he became the voice of Mickey Mouse and everything, but he did all the sound effects.
Oh, boy,
and that's actually there on The Reluctant Dragon. There's Mr. Benchley and Walt in the background.
Yeah, that's the comedian.
I can't remember his. I think it's his first. I can't remember his first name now. I know it's not Peter Benchley because that was the guy that wrote Jaws.
Oh, you keep going.
But it's not important.
Okay.
Then of course there was Song of the South. Now Walt's contract with RKO said they had to have animation in any film he did. And that's why these 3 films had animation in them. And he made optimistic films for families, and he would read a script, and then when he started getting into straight live action, that's from his TV show. But see who's on the wall? There's Uncle Remus and Br'er Bear and Br'er Fox. And that was on the set frequently. So Dear to My Heart was the 3rd one he did, and that was the one that was based on how he grew up in Missouri. That's the little boy and girl from there, but they were also in Song of the South. And then he started going into British films. Let me just leave that up there, and I'll set up how he got into that again, because we touched it earlier, a long time ago. Because of World War II, all the money he made in the UK, it got froze there, so he had to spend it in the UK. Walt and Roy said, well, there's an opportunity. We'll make some movies over there. They had a movie like a Hollywood that was in England there. And even it was still there in the 70s because Star Wars films were made there, and Indiana Jones.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
But they it's like if you have a gift card for one store, you can't go to another store with that gift card. That's pretty much what they did to him. So he was translating that money into something you could take out of England. And the first film that he made there was Treasure Island. And one of the things that's important with that is he always had a great eye for casting. Like he chose James Baskett for Uncle Remus. Well, he chose Robert Newton for Long John Silver, and that's how we think of pirates, is because of how he played that character. That was the first time anyone went R and matey and all that. That's in Robert Louis Stevenson's house. He was the author of Treasure Island. And
boy, that's a big camera. Good
yeah, well, that's what they were like back then. It's the same boy that was in Song of the South and So Dear to My Heart there, Bobby Driscoll. Robert Newton would always come to the set with a hangover because he drank a lot. And the director said that he was better in rehearsal than he was on film. So as good as he was on the film, he was even better in rehearsal.
Oh, no, that's not good.
But another thing that happened with this film here is Bobby Driscoll was the only American in the cast, little boy, because Walt wanted to have it accessible to Americans. And there was a law where they pulled up on him that you couldn't have any Americans working in a film. So they got a judge to say that he couldn't have him work on it anymore. We'll skip back there. So
sorry.
That's okay. So what they did, instead of filing for more or an appeal, they just shot all of his close-ups for 6 weeks. Then they got a body double to do the long shots in the Treasure Island. But there's another case where big government was screwing with Walt's films, and
no kidding,
he found a way around it. And after all this, a few years later, Robert Newton was in a sequel to Treasure Island somebody else made, but was directed by the same director. And then he did a television series, had nothing to do with Walt, but I think that's why Walt was so tight on his actors after that, because everyone thinks those were Disney productions, but they weren't. Now, the second one that filmed there was Robin Hood, and he wanted to have Robert Newton as Friar Tuck. He was going to have Bobby Driscoll in it, but after all that, he didn't. So they did this, and the next one was Sword in the Rose, and that's about Henry VIII and his sister, and that's considered the most lavish production that Walt made in Europe. And that was the first one he made with Glenys John, who was the mother in Mary Poppins. He did 3 films with her total, counting Mary Poppins.
Wow.
And
I didn't realize so many movies were made over there in Europe.
Oh, they have a whole film industry. Even that Alistair Sims Scrooge from 1951, that was made there. That's Rob Roy, that's like Braveheart. That's the Disney version. And let me give you a quote that Walt said about his films over there. He said, "All my films are for grown-ups. Some people don't ever grow up, and some are old the day they're born. Most of us retain a love for fantasy and heroic adventure." And that's how By works. He did all the special effects for this stuff. And that's why his films were so great on special effects. So Walt said, most of us retain a love for fantasy and heroic adventure. To the longer the days we live, these are the people I make movies for, and I don't care how old they are. But By works, we've touched on him many times, but he made possible all these special effects we're going to get into in a lot of these films.
Oh, wow.
Now that one I found this picture. That's Walt beating Ub with a gun when they're making a film when they were starting out in Kansas City. Wow. If you just crop that where he's beating Ub with a gun,
yeah,
you don't know that it's on a film. That's like what they do with history. I'd like to see what film that was for.
Yeah, what is that? That's cool. All right, where are we headed next?
Well, I think Peter Ellenshaw is the folder there.
Okay.
I think it's in that one. I'm not looking at it while you're looking at it, but
let's see here. Yep, gotcha. Fire away.
He's just as important as Ub Iwerks. Walt found him in England when he was making these films. He introduced matte painting to Walt, and I'm going to show you what matte painting is by some of the pictures here. But he was with Walt after Walt died. He was still there in the 70s working. He had been an RAF pilot. Walt invited him to come work in America for him, and this is how they do the matte painting. They'd paint it on glass like that.
Wow.
And
wow.
No, all this was before digital. That's why I wanted to make sure we mentioned Ub Iwerks again and Peter Ellenshaw, because some of these things they did are very impressive.
Yeah.
See how the camera is there, and it's filming whatever he's got painted on the glass. It's probably a boat. I think that was for Treasure Island, but I'm not positive. But I've got some there for Treasure Island.
That's wild.
Peter Ellenshaw and his wife, they sold their house and they moved. They went right to California. And Walt, when he got there, Walt said, "Well, what's Peter doing here?" Because they weren't set up for live action yet. And he said, "Well, we'll find something for you to do in the studio." And he painted the first map of Disneyland that was on the brochures.
Wow. Okay.
While he was there. And then he started working on all the different films. And now this is an example of what matte painting is. This is for Treasure Island. You see there's a modern city in the background. And then the next still will show what it looked like in the film. He put all those ships in there.
Block it, yeah.
And his son was Harrison Ellenshaw, and Peter trained him, and he worked on all the Star Wars films. Now this here is from Darby O'Gill, but in the background there's a church, but it's just a cube in the background. And then in the next picture, we'll see there's a church there, and the roof is on the house.
Ha! Wow.
And that's all painted on glass.
That I had no idea they did that.
And see, a lot of the stuff with CGI, I think, looks fake. And this is another example. They're in a countryside, and now there's going to be a ruin on the hill in the next picture. But that's really the look of Walt's films, and it's because of Peter Ellenshaw doing these paintings. And at one point, he was getting pressure to hurry, and that castle's painted on the hill there too. And Walt said, "Your paintings are getting sloppy," and he said, "Well, the producers are rushing me," and he said, "Don't worry about the producers. I'll just take care of that." And he didn't care how much things cost. This is for Darby O'Gill. Now this is we're going to go into this a little later, but this is the throne room. And this is going to show you how the matte painting worked on that.
Gosh.
That's just the painting. And he'd have to go on the set and paint things on the set so it would match the painting. And this is before and after where they put a castle in.
Wow, man.
That's probably for Sword in the Rose. And see there's just a little entryway of the castle that was built, and he painted everything else there. This used to be a whole art and film before digital. These are for the Love Bug, and they they didn't film a lot outside for the Love Bug. So all that background is painted.
I remember that so well. I mean, that is
well for Mary Poppins. They never even went outside. See, all that's a painting. They just had cars parked in the studio, and he painted all that.
I love it.
And Dean Jones is there, and the cars are real. But I was just finding some examples to show you what his work looked like in film. And there he is painting that brochure map of Disneyland. And when Walt saw that, I said, "Well, how much are they paying you?" And it was $250 a week. And he said, "Well, that's not enough, but we can't give you a big raise at once. So we'll just every month give you a raise." And
that is, look at that thing.
And I don't know how long he took painting that, but he was doing that while they were setting up the studio to do live action films. And with the live action films, Walt chose evergreen topics, just like he did for his animated features, and they would still get rotated in release every 7 years like the animated features did back then. And now a lot of them, nobody knows what they are anymore. I only know because we had the Disney Channel when I was a kid, and they played them all the time.
Boy, is the Disney Channel playing anything of
I don't think
value anymore?
When I was in college, they quit playing the stuff Walt made, and that's when my parents got rid of it. I was at college, so I wasn't around for it. But I didn't want it after that because it was all those tween shows. And
no, I'm with you.
I don't know what's on it now.
Yeah, I'm afraid to look. So what are we in 20,000 Leagues?
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, people don't realize this was the most expensive movie made up to that time. And before that, I think it was Gone with the Wind. And Walton intended to do this as an animated feature, but when he was in England working on the films, Harper Goff, who we mentioned this is the other thing. The first studio they built there at the studio, the first soundstage, Dragnet was filmed there. So I got some pictures of Dragnet. So Walt knew Jack Webb very well. And he also died of smoking.
That'll do it.
But they had two sound stages by then from the 1940s, and Dragnet was on one of them. Then he built the one for 20,000 Leagues. He built two of them, I think. But Harper Goff he did a treatment with storyboards while Walt was in England, and they talked Walt into doing this into live action. They built a soundstage with a water tank just to do this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I think is the first folder Richard Fleischer there?
Richard Fleischer, yes, sir.
Richard Fleischer is who Walt chose as a director. And the reason he chose him is he saw a movie that he directed and had that little boy in it, Bobby Driscoll. And he said, if anyone that can make Bobby Driscoll act has to be a good director. And Richard Fleischer, before he would accept, he wanted to call his father first before he accepted the job, because his father was Walt's biggest competitor, back in the early days of animation, Max Fleischer. And I have all of his creations here, what he was famous for.
Huh.
That's Coco the Clown. And he was just as brilliant. That's Bimbo. I'm sorry, that's the biggest I could find. That's Betty Boop. And he was like a man from the Victorian era. He was probably 10 years older than Walt, but he didn't like Walt because he thought Walt was always imitating him. But Max Fleischer's studio was the only one with quality that could compete with Walt in the 30s. And he thought Walt was a young whippersnapper that was just imitating him all the time. And he did Popeye, and then Superman. And people say that Walt wouldn't know anything about superheroes, but those were very popular in the early 40s. So he would have seen what the competitors were doing. That's the different Coco's the Clown. So when Richard called his dad, Max Fleischer said, you didn't have to ask me. This is a great opportunity for you, and you go take that job and tell Walt that he has a great taste in directors. And Walt had a message for Richard to give his dad. Next time he's in California, stop by the studio and we'll have a lunch with all of the animators that work for Walt now. And I have a picture of that coming up. Now that's like the those statues that they would draw characters, but that one's jointed.
Yeah.
And Richard Fleischer Max Fleischer also did 2 animated features. There's Gulliver's Travels. These are in the public domain, so you'll see them all over the place. They're probably on Tubi. Mr. Bug Goes to Town, but it's also known as Hoppity Goes to Town. And that one's a better feature than Gulliver. That one didn't take off because it came out right when Pearl Harbor got bombed. And that's the Inkwell reunion, and they also have signed that. And whenever Walt was in New York, he would look up Max Fleischer after this, and they'd have lunch, and they became friends because of this.
That's good.
But that's what Richard always told the story that way. But some of the people today, some of the gatekeepers, they say Richard, or they say or Max Fleischer still hate him. And these are other films that Richard Fleischer did. Fantastic Voyage. That's the one where they shrink down they go into the human body, and that's Dr. Dolittle. He directed that. Tora. That was the Japanese and the United States in World War II for Pearl Harbor. It did both sides.
Wow.
And your favorite?
My favorite. Okay.
It's People.
I've never seen this movie.
Well, you don't have to see it.
I know.
You know how it ends.
It's because Pat ruined it for me. I already know it's People.
It's People.
In the year 2022.
Well, we're already 2 years past that.
Yeah.
That's another. And then here it is is that Spanish or French? You can say it to Pat in French or Spanish there.
French, yeah.
So Leo Vert.
Okay.
But the Fleischers were always interested in scientific things, so that's why he was drawn to those kind of films, and he was drawn to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yep.
Now we go into the images for the film, and Walt was heavily involved in putting this film together, just like he was for the animated features. He worked on this daily with a writer, and eventually the writer would find Douglas. Wow. Well, this was the first film he had with big stars, and when he asked how much they cost, he said Donald Duck doesn't even work for this much. And he got Alfred Hitchcock's set designer to do the sets on this thing, and they made several models of the Nautilus in different sizes. And a lot of the Nautilus models were built from fiberglass, a lot of the sets. That's George Pal, they made that gentleman's agreement. One of them was going to do 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and one of them was going to do the Time Machine. And
right.
That's how they switched places on that. And that's with there's these next few, and there's Peter Lorre there with a cigarette. The next few has Walt with some of the actors there. Walt was so deep into this film, he was sleeping at the studio where they're working on the story, and the screenwriter was looking for ways to go home where he wouldn't run into Walt because he didn't want homework to do.
That's awesome.
And the joke always was that the reason Roy didn't have any hair was he tore it all out because Walt would come up with things for him to spend the money on. Roy would have to go find all the money.
Oh, look at that. That is wild, man. When you see it like that, because it looks, like you're looking at a boat.
They blow that up, and how they did the Nautilus in that is it was just the top of one, and it had lights on it, and that's how when it goes through the water, and there's to crash into the boat. And the reason the Nautilus is designed the way it is because now this is a Matt thing. He's got 3 different crowds there, and they just kept moving them and rolling the film back. It's the same crowd in 3 different places.
What were you starting to say? The reason
the Nautilus was supposed to be a sea monster in the book. That's what it looked like. So they made it. Harper Goff made it look like a crocodile and a shark combined together. And this is the giant squid sequence. The first version, it's called the sea set squid. We're going to link to the surviving video of this in our links.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. It's a great time to remind people. There's so much information. There's so much that Ed goes over that if you hear something that you want to do more exploration on, please look in the description. I get it up as quick as I can. And just below here, you'll have all the stuff that Ed references if you want to do further study or look into this stuff. Okay.
This footage is like someone making home movies of it, but that's all that exists. But it was a calm sea. It was right at night, and they had a different kind of squid. And you could see the wires and everything. And Walt come down and he said, what are you shooting? A Keystone Cop comedy?
Ooh.
And Richard Fleischer explained what the situation was, and Walt understood, and he told him to go film something else. He'd take care of it. This had 28 puppeteers to make the squid work on this version.
Go.
And they made a different squid and came back to, and this raised the cost like $500,000 in 1954 money. So this is the most expensive film ever made up to that time. Most people don't realize that.
Man. And
what Walt figured out is he said this should be a scene where it's nighttime and there's a storm and it's man against nature and you can hide things. And they didn't use wires in the final squid, but that raised up all this extra money to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And later they did the underwater scenes. Those were the first scenes like that filmed underwater, and they had to have 22 people behind the camera with 11 people in front of the camera to do the underwater scenes because you had to have people. Something went wrong, and they went and filmed those in the Bahamas, and that's where the water was clear.
That's not a bad place to have to go work.
No, it's underwater though, and they could only be under there for like 20 minutes. They had to time it an hour from when they put the first guy in his suit. But this film was in CinemaScope, and it was only the second film made in CinemaScope. And there was only they only had one lens to work with on this movie because there weren't very many CinemaScope lenses made.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, you think of how innovative all the stuff that Walt was doing at that time. Mm-hmm. And today nobody would care about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But this was really something people went to see. On the end of his show each week when this premiered, it said audiences were thrilling to see the movie. And the movie went over budget, and the bankers were going to shut it down. They had to show them what they'd made, and they gave Walt the rest of the money to finish the film. And it took 2 years to make the whole thing from start to finish. It was 6 months to a year to prep it, and 6 months to shoot it, and 6 months to edit it. And they also had a documentary crew they were filming for Walt's TV show. And you think about that, this was like doing bonus features for DVDs before DVDs existed. And Walt loaned out his staff to do Forbidden Planet's special effects. That's why I had that there. Most people know what Forbidden Planet was. When they did the documentary and they put it on Walt's TV show, that won an Emmy. And the film itself won 2 Oscars, and it was one of the most successful films in 1955. And you think of the other films of that time that were like the 10 Commandments was out at that time. That was a big special effects film.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Where are we headed next, Ed?
Well, I think the next one's TV. I'm not looking at it. I can't
ask you because
they're all numbered.
I got a folder that closed on me. Let's see here. Okay, how about are we going TV serials?
Yeah, TV serials.
Go for it, man.
Walt got into TV because he was trying to fund Disneyland, but he retained the same quality he had on everything else he did, and he shot on location, and he shot things in color, even though all the TVs were in black and white. And we talked about Davy Crockett before, but I have it in here. So we have a whole, this is supposed to be, if we get through everything, this is a record of everything Walt made in live action. So you can go back and pause it and see all the posters and everything. All right, this was for Walt's original TV special before he got into TV. That was 1 Hour in Wonderland.
There's Mortimer Snerd.
Yep. Well, that's Charlie McCarthy, but Mortimer Snerd was there as well. And that was his neighbor, Edgar Bergen. And his daughter is Candace Bergen.
Right.
And when Edgar Bergen died, they buried Charlie McCarthy in a coffin as well. And that he hasn't been seen since. Walt's first things in live action were the True Life Adventures. And how he got into those was he had all these people filming footage of animals for animation. And he decided, why don't I cut these into a film? And he did Seal Island, that won an Oscar, and then he started doing a whole series of them. And
Waterbirds, Beaver Valley.
These aren't all of them. I just gave a sample because they were the last thing Roy Jr. put out before he died on DVD. He put all the True Life Adventures out on 4 DVD sets. Volume 1 through 4, and if you get them, they're all there.
Wow, a lot of them here. Good grief.
Well, there's enough to fill 8 discs. And that one had Scrooge McDuck and money. That's why I stuck that there. And that one came in the 70s. They just cut some of the shorter ones together.
So are these narrated almost like a Mutual of Omaha?
Yeah. He would, and see, this was the first time anyone ever did a documentary like that. So Walt invented the nature documentary.
Who would be the and maybe you don't know.
I think it was Winston Hibbler, one of the guys that worked at the studio, but I can't remember offhand. Now that one that's called Perry, that was called a True Life Fantasy, and they took 2 years filming the squirrel acting out a story. And the story was by the same guy that did Bambi.
How do you train a squirrel to?
Well, that's why it took 2 years. Now he also did this series, the companion series called People and Places. And there's like 26 episodes of this, and they were all the different cultures in the world, and they would go film them and he'd make a documentary about them. And that Disneyland short that we linked to a few weeks ago, that was made as part of this. And now they're not shown because the woke people say they're racist. And I also read when I was reading or researching on this, they're relaunching People in Places, but they're using other people's films now, documentaries, to put them out there. So they're probably going to be woke documentaries.
Probably. Mickey Mouse Club?
Yep. Let me get that up here.
Okay.
Mickey Mouse Club had serials on it. Like you'd come in and you'd follow each week. And maybe half of these are on DVD and the other half aren't. That's Walt with the Mickey Mouse Club there.
Wow. Simpler time, man.
Yeah, and this was where they did the different reporting, but that kid on the right, he became one of Walt's big actors as Tommy Kirk.
Okay.
We talked about him before. He left in Scandal. Most popular series on there was Spin and Marty, and it ran 3 seasons. It's about a rich kid from the city going to the country, and he stays on a ranch. And we have a little Easter egg here where you can find it in a Pixar movie. That's Annette there and Darlene Gillespie. And that's the logo for the ranch. And in Toy Story 2.
There it is.
I had to put that in. And that was because John Lasseter was born in the 50s. So he knew this.
I gotta write that down. I like it. I like some. Where's my post-it notes, Ed? Here we go.
Triple R Ranch.
Okay, I love it.
But that's what I mean. John Lasseter cared about things like that in the movies. Who's going to know that? I mean, you've seen that movie 20 years, didn't know. Walt did the Hardy Boys, and they did 2 different serials on that. And only one of them's been out on DVD. The case of the Applegate Treasure.
I got to take more notes, man. There's too much. Don't forget, everyone, the links on the YouTube channel.
Well, I'm going to link you to a channel that has all these on it, but just go through the YouTube channel. I didn't link to each one individually. That the Clinton Mac, that's an American boy in London, and where his father's stationed, and they solve a crime, I guess. I haven't seen that one. Corky and White Shadow, that's about a girl and her dog helping her dad, the sheriff, track down outlaws.
All right, I like it.
But these were just wholesome things. That's Darlene Gillespie, and she was going to be in the next one with Annette, but she got sick, I guess, when she was preparing for it, and they wrote her out. Annette was the most popular Mouseketeer, and she became like what you'd think of Miley Cyrus today.
Mm-hmm.
She was a singer, and she was in all these films and everything, but she didn't turn into a freak like that. Like, well, you saw it. She went from like 2 years to praising
Montana,
Jesus on stage, and then she was riding wrecking balls half naked. Well, she was.
Stuff, man.
Now this year was called Adventures in Dairyland, and this one was done in association with American Dairy Association, and that was part of the Mickey Mouse Club, and the character of Moochie, he was in that one, and Moochie became his own. That wasn't his real name. His real name is Kevin Corcoran. That's at Disneyland because Moochie was in a Moochie in Pop Warner Field and Moochie in the Little League, and they tied it in with a event at Disneyland, Pop Warner football there. Annette, after she left Disney, she became a teen star, and Walt made her promise she would never wear a bikini. And she said that she respected Walt so much she never did. But even the expert gatekeepers today, they argue with you on that. They say that she did, but she didn't. And she always told that story. I have footage of her telling that story, like in 6 different documentaries.
You go, Ed.
Well,
okay. I love it, man. All right, where are we at here? Cereals? Or
these are. Well, was there one for Bill Walsh in that last one? I don't remember if I moved him.
You want me to take a look?
Yeah, just take a look.
Stand by. Let me scroll back up here. Robert Stevenson.
Oh,
see
I didn't know he was
in Mickey Mouse Club. I'm sorry.
Mickey Mouse
Bill
Club.
Walsh. Yep.
Okay, let me get my page back for Bill Walsh.
See, look, I've got you all messed up now.
Well, that's okay.
All right, here's Bill.
I only have a few pictures of him, but I have a little paragraph here about him. He was Walt's most prolific writer-producer. Everything that Walt did that was a success, he was behind all the way back to the mid-40s. How he got his start was he wrote for a college play, and Barbara Stanwyck discovered him. He wrote for Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. He started writing for the Mickey Mouse comic strip in 1943. He wrote for Edgar Bergen as well. And then when they did that movie Fun and Fancy Free, he wrote for Edgar Bergen, and he didn't leave Disney. He wrote the Uncle Remus comic strip. He was put in charge of TV production in 1949. He did the 2 Christmas specials. He did Walt's TV show. He did the films over in Europe, the Mickey Mouse Club, Davy Crockett. And what he had to say, the quote I have from him is, Walt called me one day and he said he wanted to go into television, and I was the guy who was going to do it. I looked at him stunned and I said, I don't know anything about television. And Walt smiled back and said, that's okay. Nobody else does either. Ward Kimball and Ub Iwerks both said that he was the only genius on the lot, and that says a lot for Ub Iwerks to say that. And Bill Walsh said that it's important to identify what your topic is to the audience before you even begin the story. He liked to go to the theaters, and he watched the dad would go to the theater with their kid, and they would enjoy themselves while the mom was shopping. He liked to see the families enjoy the films that he made. And he always put a little bit of Walt in some of the characters in the script, so Walt would see himself in the script. And he stayed with Disney there until he died in the 70s. He died of a heart attack. He was always smoking. So that's Bill Walsh, very important figure. Now, this was that map that we showed before, but this is Walt in front of it. This was in the his patriotism one.
Yeah.
He was going to do all these shows on American folklore and figures, and the first one they did was Davy Crockett. And if you want to know about Davy Crockett, go back to that episode that's about his patriotism.
Yeah, we covered that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so that wasn't going to cover it again. And to film a lot of these, Walt bought a ranch to film outdoors, the Golden Oak Ranch, And he was originally going to even build a house there and live there, and he was going to have a train out there and all this other stuff. And the reason it didn't happen is his wife didn't want to live that far away from the city. But he even had houses designed and everything to move out there. But these ones are just so people know that they exist. These are all the serials and the patriotic films. But we covered a lot of these in the Walt patriotism episode. But I just wanted them here so we have this definitive record. I hope we have time.
Westward Ho, and that Westward Ho is not available on Disney Plus anymore.
Even the DVDs out of print. That one there has never been on DVD. I bought a Laserdisc player just to have a copy of that on Laserdisc. That one's about the horse that survived Custer's last stand. That's Zorro there.
All right, and Zorro, what up?
Now, did you know Zorro is Batman's a ripoff of Zorro?
Did you know that?
Well, I'll describe it. Zorro is a rich playboy who goes as a Cape Crusader at night. He lives in a mansion with a cave lair underneath. He goes through a grandfather clock to get there, and only the butler knows his true identity.
Wow, that sounds very familiar. Yes.
Yeah. Well, even Batman now acknowledges that Zorro is because now they have Bruce Wayne's parents get murdered after they're leaving a Zorro movie.
Oh my word. That is incredible.
That's Alfego Baca. And that way, see, a lot of these he would air the different episodes and then he would cut them together into feature films and release them again as a feature film. In Texas, John Slaughter, that went the longest. I think it went for 18 episodes. Andy Burnett, that went for 6. I discovered that one last year. It was really good. That's Leslie Nielsen as the Swamp Fox. He's a dramatic actor.
There he is. All right. Francis Marion.
That's the 10 Who Dared. That's about the first people mapping the Colorado River. And that also has the Big Fisherman. We talked about that in the Faith episode. That's Johnny Tremaine, and that's the first film that Robert Stevenson directed for Walt. We talked about that one in that episode. But I think Robert Stevenson's next.
Yeah, let's see here.
He's the most prolific director of Walt's films.
Okay.
And he was a director in the UK in the 30s and 40s, and then he came over with Alfred Hitchcock, and they worked for David O. Selznick, and he worked in Frank Capra's unit in World War II, where they did the documentaries, because Frank Capra ran the film unit in World War II. And these are some of the films that Robert Stevenson made before he worked for Walt. That was with Orson Welles, Jane Eyre. And how Walt discovered him is he did the TV version of Miracle on 34th Street in the 50s. You always see it in the public domain with the guy that was Uncle Billy, and It's a Wonderful Life is Kris Kringle in that one. Okay. And I love the title of this one.
I love that. Oh, that makes me want to say, so I married a communist. Like, so I married an axe murderer.
Yeah.
Married a communist. Hold on. Her beauty served a mob of terror whose one mission is to destroy.
Well, that's why I have there's like 3 posters here, and they all have a different saying with it.
She follows a vicious pattern. First, an innocent flirtation, then love, then disgrace. Finally, murder.
And now they're claiming that Robert Stevenson was a leftist and he made this movie. So,
oh my goodness.
And his quote for the Disney movies is, "When I'm directing a picture, what I always have in mind is a happy audience enjoying the movie in a movie house together." Now, that's very different philosophy from the people making movies today. In 1977, Variety said that he was the most commercially successful director in the history of films. He did 19 films that had made the top grossing film of all time. Now, this was before George Lucas and Spielberg. But there's nothing written about him anywhere, like a book or anything. And you would think there would be for someone that successful. Same with Bill Walsh. He was also put in Variety as the most successful producer up to that time. And if you probably adjust their films for inflation, they're probably still right up there with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Because every one of the movies that you think of for Walt Disney, these fantasy movies and everything, Robert Stevenson directed them and Bill Walsh wrote them and produced them.
Okay, so is our next folder Old Yeller?
Well, he's in, Old Yeller. I just got to find where my note is on that.
Okay, while you do that, let me just say one of my earliest.
I got it.
I would hang out at a nursery school after school, or let's see, before I went to elementary school. When I was really young, I would go to a nursery school there in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of my earliest memories, they would put movies up on the screen, and I remember being so sad so sad watching Old Yeller.
It wasn't a successful film when it first came out because there was no repeat business.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
Well, here's
I
the
want to
story.
see the ending of that movie twice.
Here's the story of Old Yeller.
Okay.
The producer brought the story to Walt's attention. It was a serialized story in 4 issues of Collier magazine, and the agent for the author wanted they needed to know if Walt was going to buy it. And Walt waited and waited and waited, and they had a meeting, and Walt said, well, there's not enough story there to be a feature film. And the producer accused Walt of never reading it at all. They had a big fight, and they took the producer had a hold on the story. He took the hold off, and then Walt called him later that night, and he said, buy that story. And the producer said, it's going to cost us more now. And Walt says, I don't care how much it costs, you buy that story. And when it came time to cast the dog, Walt wanted a hound dog. And the producer wanted the dog that's in the film. And well, they did.
Walt got that one wrong.
Well, this is why he got it wrong. The producer did a screen test behind Walt's back, and Walt said he still wanted the hound dog. And Walt finally said, I'll take it home to my wife, and she'll tell me which dog we'll use. And this is what his wife said. I don't like that dog. That's the only dog I like, is the one that, that became Old Yeller. The rest of those dogs you can have. I wouldn't go see that dog in that film. I want to see this dog. That's a wonderful dog. And Walt called the producer and said, you can have your dumb dog, but that's not the right dog for the picture.
Well, he was wrong. Sorry, Walt. You got that one wrong.
Well, they did a sequel where Walt did the hound dog, but the sequel didn't do very well either. The people that trained Old...
So he went and said, I'm making it with a hound dog. Is that available? What?
Yeah. Big Red. It was on DVD. I don't know if it's on Disney Plus, but there was a 2-pack with both films on it. But most people don't even... It's not Big Red. Savage Sam. I always mix those two up. It's called Savage Sam. It's about Big Yeller's son. There's a 2-pack where they're on DVD together. Well, I'll show the poster here because I just kept them together when they're films that are connected. The trainer that trained Lassie and other famous dogs trained Old Yeller, and the shooting of the climax where they kill Old Yeller, that was
spoiler alert, everybody.
Well, it's like 70 years old. Too bad if you didn't see it. I think everybody knows what happens to Old Yeller at the end of the story.
Right, even if you haven't seen the movie, man.
Well, what I liked about it, it's a coming of age story about the boy becoming a man. That's what that's about. And when Walt saw the final cut of the film, he said, he said, we made it too well, and no one's going to come see this repeat business. And Old Yeller opened on Christmas Day, so think about that if you went to go see it on Christmas Day.
What in the world?
And Savage Sam's about the brothers and a girlfriend. They're kidnapped by Indians, and Old Yeller's son has to rescue them. And the dog they used in the film, that's what Old Yeller was going to be. Now, the girlfriend was Marta Kristen, who was in Lost in Space. She was the oldest daughter. Yeah.
Old Yeller's son, really?
Yeah, it's a different breed of dog.
Right, that's my point. Okay, so... yeah. Old Yeller and Savage.
And the dad's
definitely
different.
From the same family tree.
Brian Keith was the dad in the sequel, I think. And this was to point out, they did comic strips in the newspaper every week for all these films that Walt made. And they also did comic books that were different from the comic strips, and you could go out and buy the comic book. And sometimes I've had to use comic book covers because they're not available they've never been out on DVD, or they didn't have a poster.
We headed to Darby O'Gill.
Oh, I thought we had comedies next.
Let me see here. Comedies. All right. Keith's computer was zoomed in and he didn't realize it, cutting off that folder. Okay, comedies. Yes, sir. Fire away.
Okay, the comedies. The first one was the Shaggy Dog, and originally they pitched that as a television series for ABC, and ABC passed it, so they decided to make it a feature film. That's Norm Tokar. He's another director. I don't really know a lot about him, but he did a lot of films after Walt died. Well, there's not a lot out there about the directors that died before the 90s. They didn't have their memoirs down. Shaggy Dog, when they made it as a film, it was the second highest grossing film of 1959. And it launched the fantasy franchises that Disney became famous for. ABC, they realized they made a mistake, so they made My Three Sons. They got the same child actors, and they got Fred McMurray as the dad, and they even had the dog in there. And that started a rift between Walt and ABC.
Hold on. I love that tagline. A new kind of horror movie. Horribly funny.
Yeah. Sometimes they knew how to sell these, and sometimes they didn't. They didn't know how to sell Pollyanna, but they could sell this. The Shaggy DA, that was the sequel that came in the 70s.
Oh no, not the Shaggy DA.
It wasn't a very good film, but that one was directed by Robert Stevenson.
What are we doing?
He didn't do the original one. And this was a poster that they aired them all on in the 80s on the Wonderful World of Disney, but they also did a remake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Absent Minded Professor mentioned that on the Patriotism Show. And
I did watch that. I don't know if I told you that.
You did.
Finally watched that. Yeah, it's fun stuff.
Well, I got another interesting fact that I didn't know before, or I had forgotten. When they filmed the Capitol building, they were painting it and it had a red undercoat on it. And so when they filmed it in black and white, it would have been black. So they had to use infrared film to photograph it. And that's where that joke comes from, that they're painting the Capitol. Because in real life, they were.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the line. That is awesome. Okay. I love stuff like that.
Oh, there's stuff we can't ever get to for Toy Story 2 where there's references to the version they didn't make that's in the version they did make.
Make a YouTube channel.
I did, but I don't know when I'll move in. But
because when this series is done, you're going to be laying in bed at night going, oh, I don't think we ever talked about, and this and this. Keep a notepad by your bedside because it'll be no time at all before you have plenty more content to share, and you're going to have to do that for us. Okay. So that was the flying car they were in. And so after that, they made Son of Flubber?
That was a sequel. That was a few years later. And that one dealt with government red tape. It tied up the Flubber money, so he had to do a new invention so he could save the college. It's a very similar story to the first one. Where they got to do all these stories is they bought stories from Look magazine about weird inventions, and Bill Walsh had to come up with a plot that they could use all these weird inventions, and they had scientific consultants working on this. Merlin Jones, that was going to be 2 episodes of Walt's show, and that became a college movie. And it was a surprise hit. And you see how it's even tied in with Flubber there on the tagline. They said it was the greatest invention since Flubber or something like that. And this was the last film. The sequel was the last film that Annette was in and Tommy Kirk. And that was The Monkey's Uncle. That we're just going to have them all right here. And in The Monkey's Uncle, there was a band that was playing at Disneyland. They decided to have the title song sung by it. And it was the Beach Boys.
Oh, cool.
And there's a poster tagline in one of those monkey. It's got the monkey laughing, and we'll have to zoom in on it. It's not that one. Okay. Zoom in on that if you can at the bottom. And read what that says. Look for the name Walt Disney for the finest in family entertainment.
There it is, yeah.
And now think of what it is now.
Oh, gosh.
And all 4 of these films, Absent Minded Professor, and these films here, they established Medfield College, and this tied in with it because it's a comedy from the 70s, The Barefoot Executive, but it's the same college in the Dexter Riley movies with Kurt Russell, Medfield College. Those were after Walt, but it's the same college, so I put it all in the same folder.
What year was Absent Minded Professor?
I think 61.
Okay, so that's fascinating because so what early 1961 you've got Eisenhower warning of the military industrial complex, and
he was a friend of Walt. They did that.
Is that right? Which makes sense because if anyone hasn't seen that, there's a scene that you told me about ahead of time, and so I loved it when you've got the 4 branches of the military sitting around a table. And they all act like they're not interested in this new technology. And then as soon as they get a chance, they're hightailing it out the door to get to this technology to implement in their branch of service. So that's fascinating to think it was the same year as that. And
he plays it plays the theme of each branch of the military for each general.
Yes.
Now, Bon Voyage, that one was inspired by Walt's trips to Europe. And it was going to be directed by the guy that did Pollyanna and The Parent Trap, but he got more money from another studio, so he left. And that's Walt on one of his trips to Europe with his daughters and his wife.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I put that in there.
So he had 2 daughters.
The one on the right was adopted, and the one on the left was his biological daughter. But he treated them equally.
Those are the only kids they had, right?
That's the only kids he had. I guess the adopted daughter's kids are in a lawsuit to get their inheritance for some reason. I saw that when I was researching.
Oh boy. Okay.
Not. I don't know. It's sad when families fight over money and things.
Yeah. Are we going to the back lot here?
Yeah, these are pictures from the back lot. Some of these were from a friend of mine who was there in the 80s. And this is one of the links is going to show a video tour of the back lot. That's what Walt's studio looked like from the air.
Wow.
It's the same studio that was in the Reluctant Dragon, but the back lot wasn't there yet. And all this back lot was torn down when Eisner took over to put in office space.
Mm.
But you'll see all these buildings through all the different films, and they dress them up as different time periods and things. It's like a stock company, but it's buildings. You'll see the same actors in a lot of these films too.
Man, yeah, this is I'm hung up on this picture because I'm thinking of forgot the character's name. There's a modern Marvel show. Anyway, that looks like that set. I can't think off the top of my head. Let's see here. Okay. Cool.
That's one of the animators, and there's some more of the animators there. I think they were looking at it before it got tore down. That's Walt's office, and they've recreated it, I guess, after Iger took over. They put it back in the building, but that's how Walt left it.
Boy.
I just stuck that in there, too, because I thought that might be kind of interesting to go with that.
That's that office is too neat. Certainly, that's not.
Well,
exactly how he left
they
come on.
They made it tidy, but
I know. Like I was thinking of my office at work, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no,
all the artifacts and the drawers and everything are there, but they're probably neater than what he left it.
Somehow, like I'm like a professor, with all my crap stacked up all over the place.
I have to have organized clutter because then I know where stuff is. That's how it is. I know which stack the papers are in.
Thank you. Someone who gets me. Thank you, Ed. Exactly.
I thought it's a guy thing.
This isn't right. This isn't anyone else's office. This is my office.
Yeah.
I know where stuff is.
If I wanted someone else to look, I would have it labeled.
Organized it with them in mind. I would have consulted somebody. Okay, so now we're going to
Darby O'Gill, I think, is next.
Yep. Wow, now this a lot of photos in this folder.
Well, I'm going to explain some of the effects. This one's just about that film.
Okay.
This is a forgotten production, but it was one of Walt's major productions, and it was a very important film to him. He wanted to make it since the 1940s, and these are the books that it's based on. I have both books there, and if it wasn't for Ub Iwerks, they couldn't have done this. This is this drawing here. This is for the Broadway show of Finian's Rainbow, where it came out in the 1940s, and he remembered the actor to play Darby. And originally he was going to have a different actor, but he turned it down. These are just all the different posters. I would love to have some of these posters. This film is a very well crafted film, story wise and special effects. And if it wasn't for what they figured out how to do in this film, they wouldn't have. It's the same technology they did in Lord of the Rings and Elf. And those are very modern films, but it's the same technology. And it was all because of Ub Iwerks and Peter Ellenshaw that they were able to do this. That's Don DeGraudy. He did a lot of storyboards for Walt's films, but this was the first one that he did for the live action films, and he worked on Mary Poppins and all of those. And he figured out you had to have the costumes of the Leprechaun actors a little larger so they would look in proper proportion.
I'm looking at these pictures, Ed, and I'm realizing I know the name Darby O'Gill, but I am completely clueless on the movie here.
Well, that's okay.
What's the we got a leprechaun? What's the story?
The story is about an elderly man who in a rivalry he has between the Leprechaun King, and he captures the Leprechaun King to grant him 3 wishes.
Okay.
This is an example of how they did some of the effects. You see in the left there, there's the boots, and there's the actor standing in them, just as a gag.
I gotcha.
But see, most movies like this at that time, they were B movies. And there's the boots again. And this is an example of how a matte shot works.
Very cool, man.
This is an example of how I have a still of what this shot is, but this is how it was. This was on a mirror, and Peter Ellenshaw took away on the mirror so you could see the actor through it. And the camera shooting through the matte painting and on the mirror were all the actors over on the left side, and that's what the shot. That's how the shot you're looking at now was put together.
That is wild. I got to go back.
Yeah, go. You see all the actors are there on the left,
Uh-huh.
and then Darby's there on the right in the background. He's looking through the mirror. They scrape the paint away, and then you have the matte painting around it, and that's how they did that shot. And it took a lot of lights, and every time they fired those lights up, it blew out. It was 649 lights, and it blew out the electricity in Burbank.
No,
just to film this.
Oh no! Oh,
and that's just different examples of how this was all done. That's all the lights in the ceiling there. And now this here, how he's walking through the leprechauns. Darby's actually walking on a board, and those ones in the foreground, they're right there. They're puppets, and there's guys that turn him as he goes by.
wow!
So it looks like he's going through a crowd. And this is how they did forced perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This film's worth seeing, but if you see it right now, it's on YouTube for the St. Patrick's Day, and it's the original audio because apparently Disney Plus has one where they've dubbed the actors.
Well, why are they doing that?
Because they said people couldn't understand the Irish accents. And this film's so good, I'd rank it in the top 5 movies he made. Now, go back to that one.
Yeah,
I'd take a picture of the book itself.
Uh-huh.
I have a picture of a book. You go back there because I'll explain what you're seeing.
All right.
To play the fiddle, they had 2 violinists stick their arms through a special coat to play the violin, so the fingers would match. And that's the best I could do for the picture because it was right on a seam of a book.
Wow, that's wild, man.
But the next shot's the wide shot, and see, this is why his arms are always cut off together, because those aren't his arms. I just thought that was interesting, and that image there was always on the video cassette in the 80s. But those aren't Darby's arms; those are someone else's. The guy in this shot here, there's horses going around that throne room, and just think how complicated it is because you have real horses going in front, but they're probably projected in back. And there's all the actors, the 2 leprechauns next to Darby there. That's some of the oversized props there. Now I'm going to explain how this shot's put together too, with the forced perspective. That's that's normal size, and that's one of them has to be the leprechaun has to be 4 times the length away, so he looks knee high next to Darby. And see the seam is in the set there, and then it blends together with the beam.
That is awesome. I mean, and this is so much more impressive than this computer age and CGI and all that stuff. This is it's fascinating.
These actors weren't even famous actors. The actor playing Darby was Albert Sharp. He was retired, and Walt went and found him. He'd been retired for like 10 years. He found him in the middle of Ireland, in the middle of nowhere. There's an example how they're filling his cup with the jug. And Jimmy O'Day was the king there. He was a vaudeville actor, and he did the film because he thought it would jumpstart his career, but they didn't bill him. Walt wanted people to think he hired real leprechauns. There's another forced perspective shot there.
What?
Now this film is also the first film that Sean Connery was in. He got James Bond out of this film.
Oh, interesting.
There's Sean Connery there with Darby. Oh. There's Sean Connery, Janet Monroe. She did 3 movies or 4 movies with Walt. There's Walt with some of the actors. This was a very personal film for him. And you'll see as we go. And you think about this, a lot of these people that made these films were just farm boys from the Midwest, and they figured out how to do this. And that's an example with the matte painting there.
I mean, we've said this so many times, and I want to give credit to the viewer who came up with this. They're exactly right. What did she say? That the track that Disney has taken is the same track that our country has taken.
Yeah.
As it has fallen apart as a company, our nation has done the same. And so now I kind of want to that we've applied to the woke aspect.
Yeah.
I also want to apply it to the ingenuity aspect.
Yeah.
the people just figuring out things from scratch and creating
Well,
these masterpieces.
this was the first time this was ever done in Technicolor and everything. There had been some trick photography when all the way back when film was invented. Now, I wanted to point this out. You won't see all the Catholic symbols around her mirror. You won't see. Then we were talking about Coco. It's a Mexican culture, and there's no Catholic symbolism anywhere in that movie.
God.
And that's part of the Irish play. Now, this here is a scene where they're in the coach of death, and I have some things about deleted scenes in this movie as well, because I'm like the only. This was the premiere there, and when they had the premiere, Walt was kind of thrown that the Catholic priests were betting on the horses at the horse races. Some of the scenes I have that were removed.
Okay.
After that scene where they were drinking, Darby gets the king drunk, and they're singing a song called the Wishing Song. And a little later through the film, the king keeps trying to get Darby to sing the song, so he'll say the word wish, but Darby says a different word instead of wish, so he doesn't use his wishes up. But that climax, they're in the coach. Darby reveals his wife died giving birth to his son, and the son died too, and the daughter doesn't know any of this. And he asked the king if he would tell the grandchildren his stories, because he always wanted a grandson to tell his stories to. It was all about storytelling. And all this was cut out of the movie, but it's in I have the original screenplay in my archive.
Why did they cut that out? Seems pretty important.
I don't know. They also cut out references that the leprechauns are fallen angels that wouldn't take sides in the war between God and Satan.
Okay.
But that was in Walt's TV episode. But that scene that it was filmed, but you can see where it was cut. And even the ending of the film, the king gets thrown out of heaven. Now, this is the only advertisement I've ever seen where Walt was on the advertisement for the movie. That's how important this movie was to him. And if you go into the next folder, you'll see what he did with that. Because this is the only episode of his TV show that Walt acted through the whole TV episode.
All right.
And he did this episode. We'll link to an edited version of this, because I found somebody's posted an edited version. And in this, what this was on his show is he talks to this actor about he's going to make this movie, Darby O'Gill, and the actor sends him to Ireland to go find real leprechauns to be in the movie. And so Walt goes to see a librarian, and he tells him about the leprechauns, and he shows him this book where they go through the history of the leprechauns being fallen angels. Now, in the original book, they wouldn't take sides between God and Satan, and in the Walt version, they all hid in the golden streets of heaven because they were so small. Now, look on his hearth there. There's even Catholic imagery there, and this was for a TV show. So Walt meets Darby O'Gill, and he listens to him tell stories, and he asks Darby to take him to see the leprechauns, and they go out to see the leprechauns. And they catch one, and the leprechaun says that he'll give him the gold, and Walt doesn't want the gold. He wants to talk to the king. So they go get the king. And what ends up happening is Walt says he's going to hire them to play themselves in the movie.
So great.
And this was to advertise. I saw this when I was a kid, and I loved it. And he goes back and he tells the actor, now this is the publicity photos. He always had the king in the publicity photos. He's up on top of that's the multiplane camera, and there's the King Brian up on the multiplane camera. And there's documentaries where they use photos of Walt and the king's there, but they just zoom in so you don't see the king. That's a magazine they tied in where they told this story in the magazine too, where Walt hired them to play themselves in the movie. And that's the full photo that was used every place. And he even put that at the beginning of the movie. And that's why I think that this movie tied in with the Gremlins, because he was going to do this with the Gremlins. That's the king's crown. And this other part is a little girl in Australia wrote to the king of the leprechauns, and it got to the actor who played the king of the leprechauns, and he sent the letter to Walt, and Walt sent him a letter back. And that's what we have pictures of here. And they've been trying to find this little girl. She's probably in her 80s now. But Walt sold this as he hired real leprechauns to play themselves in this movie. And it's a very solid story. I mean, when I was a kid, I watched this over and over and over. When we got our first VCR, I think this was the first thing we recorded with it that day. It was on the Disney Channel, and
Oh, this is cool.
I watched. That's the letter Walt wrote to the actor.
Let me get this zoomed in here.
But Darby O'Gill wasn't a successful film, and
it was not. You said
it wasn't a successful film, but Walt poured all this into it. It was,
bro.
I don't think he did this much in a film again until Mary Poppins.
Oh my goodness.
That's my own opinion. What ended up saving Disney Studios that year was a Shaggy Dog, because that was the second most successful film in 1959. Sleeping Beauty lost money. Darby O'Gill lost money. Third Man on the Mountain lost money, and the Shaggy Dog saved them that year.
Okay. I take back what I said about America. No, I'm just kidding. That's just, I mean, that had to hurt, you know, these landmark movies.
And they didn't release it again until after Walt died. Didn't get released again until 1969. And I think it's probably in the top 5 movies he ever made. Right. With these fantasy movies. Next one's just got different movies in it.
Dramas?
Yeah. I didn't know what better thing to call. And what I've done is I put all these movies together just sort of by theme. They're not really in order when they were released, but that was Third Man on the Mountain. That was the movie that tied in with the Matterhorn in Disneyland. Well, it didn't do well. The same girl that was in Darby O'Gill was the girl in this movie as well. It was filmed on location at the Matterhorn. Cool. And I have a photo there of Walt when he went to visit the set. And Kidnapped, that was one of the films filmed in England. It was the first film Peter O'Toole was in, and the actor playing the villain, Walt said, "You're not paying him enough," and he doubled his pay. He's in the next. Well, I guess I didn't have that picture there.
Did I mess that up? Let's see.
I might not have. Oh, there he is. That's the actor playing the villain.
Okay.
I saw that movie before. It was a very good movie.
Okay.
But it's a British movie. And then Walt did 3 movies on different composers. And that's what the next 3 are. Well, there was also this ballerina one. I've never seen that one, but it was in a double feature with Lady and the Tramp, and it was on his TV show. But I've never seen that one. Okay. But I tied it in with he did one on the Peter Tchaikovsky to tie in with Sleeping Beauty. And the woke people are mad at this now because there's nothing in there about him being gay. So I don't know if it's on Disney. It wasn't about that. It was about him being success. And the Magnificent Rebel, that is about Beethoven. And he did one called The Waltz King, and that was about Johann Strauss. Mm-hmm. And the Tchaikovsky story, when that one premiered on his TV show, they also had it as the first stereo television show. They broadcast the audio on a radio station, so you could turn it on when it was on the television, and it was in stereo. But I don't know how they had it synced up, because you know how radio stations are.
That's fun trivia. Yeah, I guess back then though, you probably didn't have a delay or anything.
I don't know. I tried to have a little bit of trivia on some of these, but not all of them.
Certainly no internet delay. Like if you try to sync up a sporting event with the TV and the internet the way it is today, impossible. But they probably aired it at the exact time with no delays there on either. Yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, what we got here. What's this?
I think the next one's The Prince and the Pauper.
No Walt King stuff.
Well, I did that one. That one's about Johann Strauss.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then
that's okay.
There we go.
I'm just trying to go fast because I want to make sure we get through as many as we can. Cool. That's Mark Twain's story. That was the last film. Guy Williams, who played Zorro, was in for Walt. That one's never been on DVD, but I guess it's on Disney Plus because I've seen it. I saw it at my brother's house on there.
Okay.
Toby Tyler. That one was about Walt's youth when he was. The circus came to town, and they used the Mickey Mouse Club circus. They pulled out of Disneyland. All the trappings are in this movie. That next one's Pollyanna, and that was based on a popular book. It's about a recently orphaned girl who comes to live with her spinster aunt, and she changes the whole town with her biblical outlook. And the climax is when she loses all hope and the town all comes to rally behind her, raise her spirits, all the people she's helped. And this book had 12 sequels to it. It was that popular. This was another film that was a personal film for Walt because it was about small town America. It was directed by David Swift. He was an assistant to Ward Kimball back in the 40s. It was the first film Haley Mills was in.
Oh, cool.
He discovered her because he was going to have her dad be in Swiss Family Robinson. The aunt there, that was Reagan's first wife, the one that divorced him.
Oh,
That was
Jane
Wyman.
Wyman, yeah.
She was in 2 movies for Walt, but this was the first one. Walt said this is was the most important cast in the history of his studio because these were all A-list actors in one of his movies. But they didn't know how to sell this market this movie because it was not a typical Disney movie for that time. It was a drama. And when Walt saw the dailies, he would cry at the dailies because how moving it was for him. And they thought it would be nominated for awards, but didn't get nominated for anything. But Haley Mills won an Oscar for a child actress. But that's a few years ago, I submitted a buy-seller hold to Steve Dace, and they all passed that one because the name was Pollyanna. I put the 15 best Walt Disney movies. So I wanted people to realize there's movies Walt made that aren't woke because they're ruining his legacy, and none of them would admit they'd seen Pollyanna. So that was kind of why they said Pollyanna didn't do well, as men didn't go see it.
I mean, we all know the saying and stuff, like the turn of phrase. Okay,
well,
so we going
change it. Swiss Family Robinson's
Swiss
next.
Family Robinson. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Now this one, they just used the title from the book. They brainstormed ideas with the director on what you'd want a family to do on an island. Now this one, they've got the disclaimer on Disney Plus, and I'll have.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Walt wanted a tiger in the film, and the director would work with a lion, and a tiger's harder to work with than a lion. And whenever Walt would bring it up, he'd say that Ken's afraid of the tiger. And he'd go,
you blame him?
Well, of course you're afraid of the tiger, but let's do this, And Walt had one of his artists draw the storyboards. Then a screenwriter came in and wrote the dialogue for the scenes. John Mills was Haley Mills's father.
Oh, okay.
And they filmed this on the island of Tobago. The mother was played by Dorothy McGuire, and she was in several films for Walt. She was also in Old Yeller. She was the mother. She was usually the mother in a lot of the films.
Mm-hmm.
And on the island, they faced severe weather and a typhoid epidemic. That's the director, Ken Anakin. And he did several films for Walt. The treehouse they built, Walt came to see what it looked like, and he decided to add a few extra things. And that treehouse was there for decades, and it didn't finally go until it was blown down in a hurricane.
Oh, wow.
And what the woke have a problem with is the climax with the Japanese pirates. And first of all, the movie climax isn't supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be like a cartoon climax kind of a thing. And the pirates, in the end, the actors playing the pirates, they were just having fun dying over and over again, because some of these pirates die more than once if you pay attention in the
movie. Bro, come on.
And I'm going to talk about the actor that they have a problem with. His name is Sesu Hayakawa, and he was a Japanese actor. He came from, on the movie here, he came to the set with 2 women whose jobs were just to fan him all day. And he was the first actor who, from Japan, in the silent days, he was successful in both America and Europe. And the Japanese disowned him because they said he was too Americanized. So he started traveling the world acting. And in World War II, he was stranded in France, so he joined the French resistance. And he was credited after the war as being a civil rights leader and one of the leading figures that healed America's feeling against the Japanese, because a lot of these people had their kids in the Japanese prisoner of war camps, and they weren't very nice to their to the GIs there. And so this is the disclaimer they have on the Stories Matter for Disney. They try to say all the pirates are people in yellow face and brown face, but they're not. They're actually Asian actors. Some of them are stuntmen, and they're probably white, but most of them are yellow face. They're the actual races. This is what I mean about rewriting history. And then you have this actor that was a civil rights leader as the pirate leader, and then they're erasing that. And the pirates, they just had a great time doing this here. And they filmed this movie in 24 weeks. They couldn't use any of the audio because it was filmed on set. This is that actor I was telling you about.
Right.
And they had to post all the dialogue, and it was also released at Christmas. This is what he was in the 19-teens when he was in silent films. But I wanted to make sure we point out who this actor was, since Disney now says that he's a an actor, a white actor in yellowface,
What?
and
Why
he
are
was
they lying?
born in Japan. He was the most famous Japanese actor at that time.
Why would you lie about that? I don't.
I think it's because these college kids don't. He was in Bridge Over the River Kwai. That's
Oh
him there,
yeah.
and he loved that role too. He was the villain in that. But you have these kids out of college that are woke, and they just assume all this stuff, I guess. It's like I didn't mention it with Peter Lorre was famous for. I don't know if we want to insert that or not, but that was all the way back on 20,000 Leagues. But the reason he was famous is he was in a movie called M, and he was a pedophile in that movie, and that's why he got all these roles as being a sinister guy. And in the movie, the criminals hunt him down, and they're going to put him on trial, and it's the experts that come rescue him. He says he can't help it; he's born that way.
And that's 1931.
Yeah,
right?
Keith looked it up before the show. If
You
could
were
see
telling
it
me about this. It's
yeah.
I got to go see this thing. It sounds fascinating. There's the Japanese
girl,
actor being fanned
yeah.
on set.
No, they wouldn't like that. Oh, and all the teenage boys that worked on the set, they said they hoped they made it big enough where they could have women just fan them all day on set. There's this star on the Walk of Fame. I mean, he was a very important actor. And then this one they probably have a problem with because there's the sign there about shrunken heads. That was the only guy injured on the shoot.
Oh, how did he hit his head?
He fell. He was up on the mountain where they're defending it from pirates, and he fell down the mountain, went all the way down the mountain. He landed in the tiger pit.
Tell me they were recording that for that.
No, they didn't record that. It just happened.
That would have been useful, I think.
I just tried to get you enough photos there so I could get through that one.
Good stuff, man. Okay, where were you headed?
I think the next one is the Parent Trap, isn't it?
Parent Trap.
But the Sherman Brothers is the first folder.
Okay. Yep.
Because these are one of our legends. Because this is important.
Mm-hmm.
The Sherman Brothers, they became Walt Disney's biggest songwriters. But this is how they got started. They wrote albums for Annette Funicello. Like I said, she was like Miley Cyrus of the time. And so one of the guys running the music, they said, well, there's a movie called The Horse Masters that Annette's going to be in. You should write the title song. So they came to the studio to play a song for Walt. And Walt comes into the meeting and he starts telling them about this story about these two twin girls where their parents divorced, and they separate, and they meet in a camp and everything. And then the Sherman Brothers are like, Mr. Disney, we're here for a different movie.
Oh, no.
And Walt's like, well, why did you let me go on like that for 20 minutes? They played him the song, and he said, that'll work. That's the best he ever would say for a compliment. And he said, since I was wasting so much time telling you about this other movie, here's a script, and why don't you write a title song for it? And at the time, the title was called We Belong Together. And Walt originally wanted to call it His and Hers. Another title they had was Susan and I, and they kept trying to come up with a title. So the Sherman Brothers kept writing different songs, and they had Let's Get Together, and that ended up in The Parent Trap. There was another song they wrote when it was going to be called Petticoats and Blue Jeans, and that one became a song called Whistling at the Boys, and they played that at the dance in The Parent Trap. And then they wrote a song called For Now and Always, and that was what the mother sings to the daughter in The Parent Trap. That was supposed to be the love song that they sang when the parents were falling in love. They figured out that by the age of the daughters, they would have fallen in love in 1946. So they wrote a song for 1946. And that's Walt with the Sherman Brothers there. So Walt finally said, we're just going to call this movie The Parent Trap. And the director said, well, let's think about that. And Walt says, we're not going to think about it. We're just going to do it. And so they wrote the theme song for The Parent Trap. And Walt was so impressed with their story sense on The Parent Trap that he gave them a book off his shelf, and it was Mary Poppins. And he told them to go away and read it. And they went off and read it. And they came back, and they had 5 songs written, and they had 6 chapters underlined in the book. And Walt looked at the book, and it was the same 6 chapters he had underlined in his book. And they played the songs for him, and Walt offered him a job with the studio after that. That's the surviving one. He's 95 years old. That's Richard Sherman there, Dick Sherman. And now we'll go into the photos for The Parent Trap there. And it's based on a German book called Das Doppelt-Lachen. And it had already been filmed in Germany and England, and Walt still wanted to make it, even though it had bombed in both countries. And the camp in the movie, that's a former YMCA camp, and when they have the girls for extras in the camp, those are girls from the other Girl Scout camps in the area. And the house they use in the Parent Trap, that influenced people building the houses the way they, that's called I think it was American Ranch House. But what you're going to see here, I have photos of Haley Mills' body double, because you never see her in the movie.
Right, yeah.
And her name is Susan Henning, and she went on to be a Teen USA, and she dated Elvis for a year and a half. She became a model, and she was in the first Got Milk ad.
Explain to people that maybe aren't familiar with the Parent Trap and how they use the cameras and the angles and all that good stuff.
Oh, I have an example coming up here.
Oh, okay, very good.
That's the director, David Swift. Well, that's okay. I don't know how we can go into sync with the photos, but I just tell the story so we can show everything. I put a lot of behind the scene ones in because people haven't seen those. You've seen the movie, but I figured you might want to see.
I've never seen anything behind the scenes. I'm looking forward to these.
Yeah. Now this is what they were like in the movie, and the matte line is the door frame there. There's always a matte line that has to be hidden.
Again, that's the same person.
Now that one's not. That's the body double. She's on the wall there. And then
if you get her far enough away, right? Then you can use the body
but they always have her head turned away so you can't see. Now, originally, the first day of shooting, they had her wear a false nose because Haley Mills has a larger nose.
Oh, wow.
And her skin had a reaction to it, and Walt come down and he said, we're not going to do the false nose anymore. And when it was all done, she got a Duckster Award for, we talked about those before. See, there they are together, the body double and Haley Mills.
So is the trick... Okay, that's the body double. Okay.
Yeah, but you see the matte line is going to be that window there.
So you're looking for a straight line in the middle.
Yeah.
So wild.
And see, that's the similar hat there, but there's the matte line in the middle there. You see it's kind of faded there. Because sometimes they just blend the matte line.
I see. Okay.
And that's both of them together there. That's body double in the foreground. And that's really her face there, but you can't recognize her because she's covered with the cake. The one on the left is the body double. That's Walt on set there at the camp. And that body double, she I found out this week, she has a small part in the movie The No-Mobile. That was one of the last movies Walt made. And that's Brian Keith and I'm going blank on her, Maureen McCormick, and she was in a lot of John Wayne movies. And I always thought Brian Keith was kind of like a John Wayne. And now they try to make the Vicky there that he was going to marry the hero. The grandfather there, he even has the line in the movie that he eats he takes peppermint to hide the tobacco smell from the grandmother. That's from Walt because he would always smoke. The matte line would have been the bed frame there. And then there's the door frame. And this was all stuff Iworks invented. See there's the matte line there. But today they don't have matte lines. They use blue screen and computers. But I think this stuff is more fascinating because it was all done in camera and analog. It wasn't digital. And the film still holds up. This was one of the most successful movies they made. And the door frame there would have been the matte line. That's the Duckster Award she got. Remember, we had the Mouskers and the Ducksters. And they did 3 sequels to The Parent Trap in the 80s for television, and Haley Mills was in them. Parent Trap 2, Parent Trap 3, and Parent Trap Hawaiian Honeymoon. And one of them, they have triplets.
Wow. Cool stuff.
Our next one is just a folder of different movies.
Okay. Let's see here.
Like the first one is Johnny Shiloh. And that's the story about. I think it's just called Films or something, but it's numbered.
Okay, gotcha.
These are all the films between Parent Trap and Mary Poppins. They're not in order, but they're just bulked together there so we can show you the things that Walt made that's available, and a lot of them aren't on Disney Plus.
All right, let's see here. What am I doing here?
Johnny Shiloh was about the true story about the boy who ran away to join the Civil War, and he became a sergeant in the Army by age 12. And in real life, when he wanted to go to West Point, he was turned down, and General Grant had to intervene. And when he retired from the Army in 1916, he was a brigadier general.
Wow.
Greyfriars Bobby, that's a true story about a Scottish dog who mourns the death of his master, and they even have a statue of that dog there today. It's a very famous Scottish story.
Do you know the year of that?
I think it was early 60s. I can't tell you offhand. These aren't chronological order.
Okay. Just trying to.
Yeah. Well, no, that's okay. Most of these are between 60 to 64. I tried to do that, but there might be a few that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
But I also tried to find a lot of the original poster art so you could see how these were first marketed. I wish there was a book of just the poster art. And that's the actual dog in the movie. It was in Walt's show. Because when you do the introductions to the shows, now Babes in Toyland, that was what replaced Rainbow Road to Oz, we talked about in the Disney Never Was, and he cast the Mouseketeers in the film. Originally, Ward Kimball was going to direct it, but somebody put a full-page ad congratulating Ward Kimball for getting the job, and Walt didn't like that. The Ward said he didn't do it, but Ward had a lot of enemies, and they could have done it, so who knows?
What were you starting to say about this here?
Oh, he would always have introductions on his shows, and sometimes he would, with the animals, he would have the animals in the introductions, and that's what that would have been from. Okay. I couldn't believe how many animal films he made. We have a whole folder of animal films. I have no notes on them, but so you'll know that they're.
I mean, that's got to take patience, right?
Yeah.
Animals on.
Yeah. Well, I think he did that because he did the animal films because of True Life Adventures. He wanted to tell stories, and he couldn't do documentaries. And mostly started doing. He had a whole team he just hired to do animal films, and he bought them films from them. They'd go away for a year and film it and come back. And this is Babes in Toyland, and when this one got made, when Walt saw the screening of it, he said that maybe we can't make musicals here at Disney because it's not a very good film for story-wise and all that. It's more like a Christmas special. Mm-hmm. It has, and then the soldiers in the Disney parade at the Christmas time, they come from this film. I don't know if people knew that. Now, Nicky the Wild Dog of the North, that is just about a dog in the Canadian Rockies. I just have a sentence for a lot of these. I didn't go into well, there's so many of them. Huh? Yeah. Almost Angels, that's about a boy who wants to join the Vienna Boys Choir. Well, that, and I wanted to make sure we got in as many of these as we can.
Boys will be boys, even during the most important performance of their lives.
And that one, it was in a double feature with Lady and the Tramp there. It's on the poster at the bottom. Big Red's about a bitter, wealthy man who retreats into his work and with prized dogs and a boy and his dog that challenged him. And it was shot in Quebec, Horse Without a Head. That's about a group of kids that stumble on train robbers in their French village. It was filmed in the UK. They used the largest movie sets in the UK at that time.
There we go.
That's one of the comic books. Legend of Lobo is a story of a wolf in the Alaskan frontier. I haven't seen a lot of the animal ones. There's just so many of them.
Boy, do you know, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you know then at this time, like how many employees did Walt have?
I knew you were going to ask that. I don't know.
I mean, because it just seems like they're just constantly churning out stuff and multiple.
Yeah, and it was a small studio too. Right. He had the television studio, so he had to have content for the show each week and everything.
Right, and at the Blaze, they send out an email of studio use and which shows are recording at what time of day and all this stuff. And there's just so many moving parts. And the guy that puts that email together and sends it out every week, every time I look it over, I just think I would not be able to make this schedule. And I imagine it's the same situation.
Well, a lot of these were filmed on location too.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you have to have studio time and who is where and which production.
And Walt had a policy too, where he'd make this stuff. He didn't make it for feature films or television. He just made the films, and they would either be on TV or feature film or both. And this was a movie with Annette and Tommy Kirk, and it was filmed in Italy. And the story I had on that movie we just went through is she wanted a peanut butter sandwich, and they went to find her a jar of peanut butter, but they couldn't read Italian, and they ended up with a jar of mustard, and she didn't know until they made the sandwich.
Womp womp.
Yeah. Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. That was about the story of the young man with the impoverished family, and he wants to win the race to take care of their bills. That one's on DVD, and it was released theatrically in Europe, but I couldn't find a poster for it. Now, the Church of the Castaways, this was kind of a follow-up to Swiss Family Robinson, but this was all filmed in sets. It's based on Jules Verne's story about two kids with a French professor who travel the world with a British lord in search of their missing father. And everyone remembers this because there's a scene where a condor picks up a boy and carries him off, and there's a scene where they walk backwards up a staircase so nobody sees them getting onto a ship. And all these films, he did a lot of elaborate research, so the times and places all look the same, and what it would have been at that time. That's about the real story of the stallions. That there's a school in Vienna for these famous horses, and they had to smuggle them out from the Nazis and the Soviets. So it's kind of like Schindler's List with horses. I mean, that's because they were going to kill the horses.
Mm-hmm.
But no disrespect there. But now that reminds me of the Nefarious poster. Haley Mills there spinning the head there. Summer Magic was a musical, and it's about a wealthy family that loses everything, and they move to a folksy small town. It's a really good movie. Sherman Brothers wrote all the songs. One of their favorite songs was On the Front Porch, and that's in this movie. And there was the hit by Burl Ives, The Ugly Bug Ball, and I have a still of him there. And Sherman Brothers the scenes with the musical, they weren't choreographed, and they didn't make that mistake on Mary Poppins after that. But that's one of the overlooked films that Walt made, but it's a very good film. And when Burl Ives made this, he would have been filming the narration for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now that's Sherman Brothers and Haley Mills. And that's from The Ugly Bug Ball. He's got the caterpillar on his finger there. Incredible Journey. Everyone probably knows that story where the two dogs and the cat find their way home.
Sure do.
I think Walt filmed the first live-action version of that.
Wow.
Three Lives of Thomasina. That's about a widowed vet. He kills his daughter's injured cat, thinking he's putting it out of its misery. And there's a woman that everyone thinks is a witch that nurses it back to health. The daughter turns against her father. She loses her will to live, but there's a happy ending.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
But that one's important because the kids in the film are the same kids that are in Mary Poppins. That was their first film for Walt. But all these films are built. Remember, we said a few shows ago, everything Walt did build on the previous thing. And that's true with these live action films. It all builds up to Mary Poppins. Tiger Walks, that's about a tiger that escapes from a circus and it goes on a killing rampage. And Walt didn't want to make the tiger heavy, so it was only allowed to kill one person. But it didn't do well. Littlest Outlaw is about a Mexican boy who runs away with a horse to stop a general from killing it. And there were two versions shot simultaneously. And that's when Walt probably debuted on his television show, because he would always do a tie-in in his introductions. When they filmed that one, they filmed an English version and a Spanish version at the same time. The Moon Spinners is a Hitchcock film for Disney. It was his attempt to do a Hitchcock film, and it was because his wife wanted them to do one, and they didn't like how it turned out. And this one was filmed on location, and John F. Kennedy was assassinated at the time when it was on location. Moon Pilot was a satire about the space program. We kind of touched on that with the J. Edgar Hoover doing the file on Walt over these comedies with the government. A lot of the things in that file were from those movies. The Tenderfoot, that's about a guy that starts with the cavalry. Dr. Sin, we've talked about before. Scarecrow Romney Marsh, about a pastor who smuggles stuff so the people have money from the king stealing it. Moon Custers, that's about pirates and luring ships off of the New England coast. Now that one was on video, but it wasn't on DVD. And now I think we come to Mary Poppins.
All right.
Now, Mary Poppins is the ultimate Disney movie. It's his crowning achievement. Everything he did up to this point, it all led to Mary Poppins. Story, character, special effects, matte painting, stop motion, animatronics, animation. He wanted
It had
to
it
do
all, huh?
it had everything. He I think this might even be the first movie with an animatronic in it.
How often do you, if you know this, how often would Walt go to these movies and just kind of hang out in the back in the shadows and just kind of
I think he did it sometimes, and I know like Bill Walsh would do it. I don't know how often he did it, but he would want to see what the audience, how they reacted to this stuff, because he wanted to see if he knew what they.
No, and I understand that to see how they're reacting after that. I'm talking about during the process. I'm talking about on set. Would they know he's there?
He would come in to see what was going on. We have photos here with the Billy Graham stuff coming up, where he took Billy Graham on the set of Mary Poppins. I love these publicity photos he does with the characters on these films, just like his animated characters. And that was a picture they sold with all the animated characters on it.
How cool is that, man?
He tried to do this movie for 20 years, trying to get the rights from Pamela Travers. That's Bill Walsh, Don DeGraudy, and Robert Stevenson. They worked on the film there. And there's the Sherman brothers with them. They were all the brain trust on the film.
Wow, look at that.
And it took 20 years to get the rights from Travers to do this. Now while she was deciding, he had him work on bed knobs and broomsticks, and Walt fell asleep at the first story meeting. That's what that cartoon was for. And that's Pamela Travers there. And you've seen Saving Mr. Banks, but that is not the true story.
That's a shame.
Well, this is going to be as close to the true story as I can get without being there. But she didn't like Walt or his films. None of the European authors did. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis didn't like Snow White, how he treated the dwarves in it. And when he finally got to do the movie, he picked the perfect cast. That's Glennis John. She played the mother. And that's David Thomason that was the father. And the father isn't really a character in the book. The Sherman brothers and everybody, they fleshed him out as a character and made him the key of the whole story. And just like he cast for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Darby O'Gill, Song of the South, he cast all these great actors. And all those books were also short incidents, and they had to make a plot out of them. And that's another reason those are the ancestors of the Mary Poppins film. They had to come up with a motive for her being there, so that's how they made the dad into an important character, and they changed the setting. Now that's a matte painting there, and it looks like he was outside. And they never went outside on this particular movie. It was all done inside. The setting of the books are the 1930s. That's the choreographers there. This was the first big film they did. Walt hired them, believing in them. They set the setting from the 1930s to 1910 because they believed that's when a nanny would fly out of the sky. The Dick Van Dyke character was a combination of several characters from the books, and Pamela Travers didn't want it implied they were a couple, so they had to put a line in the Jolly Holiday song where he doesn't dream of pressing his advantage and all that. That's why that's there. And you think he's a goofy sidekick, but he's the one that gets Mr. Banks to change at the end of the movie. All the songs in the film. Now, this is Jane Darwell, and she plays the Bird Woman. She was a very famous actor. She won an Oscar and everything. So I showed you a picture of what she was famous for there.
What did you start to say about all the songs in the film?
Oh, I'm going to tell about the songs. I'll do since she's there. I'll do the Jane Darwell story.
Okay.
What he did was he picked her out to be in this movie to play the Bird Woman. All she did was sit there, and she was retired in an actor's home for like 10 years before this, and she was like the Angela Lansbury, Helen Hayes of her day.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so moved by Walt having her be in this movie, she cried on the set and everything, and she died shortly after this. And it was just him being kind to this person. Now, the different songs, there was originally a song called Through the Eyes of Love, and that was going to be the main theme. And this is so you can see how the matte paintings work with the photos there.
Uh-huh.
And Through the Eyes of Love, Julie Andrews didn't like it, so they had to do a new song, and they wrote Spoonful of Sugar. And how that one got written was the son of Bob Sherman had the polio vaccine on a cube of sugar.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where the spoonful of sugar gets the medicine, helps the medicine go down. The line, and this Dick Van Dyke played the old man. This is him getting the makeup on.
So cool.
The line in Mr. Banks' song was 601, I marched to my door. 601 was Bob Sherman's house address. So that Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That comes from a song in a folk song. It was boiled beef and carrots. And you'd say boiled beef and carrots, boiled beef and carrots. Any old iron, any old iron. Walt asked them where the word came from. The Sherman brothers said that when they were boys in summer camp, when you knew long words, people thought you were real intellectual. So that line's right in the song. The Bank song, that's based on Gilbert and Sullivan. The Chimney Sweep song, where that came from, was Don DeGraudy drew a picture of a chimney sweep. The Sherman brothers looked at it and said, that's a song. Step in Time, and how that became a song was they wanted to have a song with all the chimney sweeps. And Peter Ellenshaw was from England, and he said there's a song, Knees Up, Mother Brown. He did it for Bill Walsh. That's from Bedknobs and Broomsticks, but you can see how the screen worked with that. The bed flew in that one. So I just stuck it in there. So they did this Knees Up, Mother Brown for Walt. And then Walt joined them. They all were doing it for the Sherman brothers, and they came up with Step in Time. The money people wanted it cut down, and then Walt said, well, I'll buy the film and the camera. You show how it looks. And that's how it became a 14-minute sequence in the film. Let's Go Fly a Kite. That song was because the Sherman brothers were thinking about what they liked to do with their parents growing up, and their dad built kites. He was a famous songwriter too, Al Sherman. This is on set there with Walt when they're doing the Step in Time sequence. Admiral Boone had a song, and they cut it out, but it's still there for his musical theme. Whenever they do that song, the lyrics were Admiral Boom, 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 Boom. Now that is Billy Graham.
Oh, wow.
And now he came to introduce him to the people working there, and Peter Ellenshaw, and they said, well, he was busy working, and they replaced the photo in the book, in the reprint. And that's the same moment because Peter Ellenshaw is holding a hat. So those pictures would have been taken seconds apart. But he said to come meet Billy Graham, and he said, I'm busy. And Walt says, well, it's my studio. So he introduced him to Billy Graham. And originally, Sherman Brothers wrote 35 songs for Mary Poppins, but only 14 of them were used. And Feed the Birds was Walt's favorite song, and he would have them come back and play it in his office on Fridays at the end of the week. And that's a very biblical song about doing charity for others. A lot of these songs they cut out, they ended up in other films. They used the tune, but they changed the lyrics.
Okay.
And they did all this preparation work on the songs, and Pamela, for 2.5 years, then Pamela Travers had to come in and give approval, and she didn't like anything. She was crusty and demanding. She complained they chose the wrong chapters in the book to dramatize. She suggested which chapters they should have used instead. But that's a scene she was going to yodel to bring the smoke staircase down, but they cut it out of the movie. And
so that lady who showed up and didn't like it, that's
Pamela, she was the author, original author. She didn't want animation in the film. She didn't want Dick Van Dyke in the film. She quoted Winston Churchill all the time, and then she tried to get them all to recite the Gettysburg Address, and no one would do it. No one could do it. And that's why Walt had them doing this backup project that became Bedknobs and Broomsticks, because he didn't know if she was going to give him the rights to do this. And the reason they picked Julie Andrews is because she was on the Ed Sullivan Show performing a song from Camelot. Now, how they do this here with the room, there's 4 different rooms that they built for the ceiling. So there's like one on that side and one that's up close to everything. So you could never figure out how they did it, how they're floating up in the ceiling. And that's him floating there. Don't jump.
That's funny. Oh, well, yeah.
Admiral Boom there. Walt wanted to make Dick Van Dyke a one-man band.
He did.
That's at the premiere. Let me get caught back up with my notes here. To play the old man, Dick Van Dyke had to donate thousands of dollars to Walt's school because he was going to do it for free. And when Dick Van Dyke would go to lunch dressed as the old man, he'd wait for a tour bus to come down the street. Then he would take his time going across the street. Then he would watch it go up the street. He'd go marching up the sidewalk as fast as he could. He'd wave at him, thank you. He would get hate mail for playing that part. Now the story with this here is Walt's wife didn't go to the Oscars because he said he wouldn't win, and he won all those Oscars, and
look at that.
She wouldn't let him back in the house that night. It got nominated for 13 Oscars and it won 5. And it was the most popular film in America. And here's a fan theory. I like this fan theory. Uncle Albert and the bank, Mr. Dawes at the bank, they're brothers. And Dick Van Dyke, it's his uncle. And that's how Dick Van Dyke knows about all this stuff with Mary Poppins. This is a fan theory. It wasn't in the movie, but I kind of like that theory. And this is from the movie Saving Mr. Banks. That's all BS. I mean, she was really that nasty. I don't really buy Tom Hanks as Walt.
I do see the shadow of Mickey.
Yeah. Well, that's because some people said that Mickey was Walt's alter ego and Mary Poppins was her alter ego. But the thing with the dad wasn't even her idea. It wasn't in the books. That was the Sherman Brothers, Don DeGraudy, and Bill Walsh that came up with that. Now, the Mary Poppins was so successful, there were all these other films that imitated it. That's what I had in this other folder. The films are The Incredible Mr. Limpet, Seven Faces of Dr. Lau, Dr. Dolittle, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Daydreamer, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. There were 2 Disney ones, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Pete's Dragon, and then Ken Atkin that did Swiss Family Robinson for Walt. He wanted to do Mary Poppins, and Walt didn't choose him. And so the film he decided he wanted to make for his daughters was Pippi Longstocking, and that came out in the 80s. So Mary Poppins had this long, it like invented this genre of this magical musical. This didn't exist before Mary Poppins. I mean, there was the Seven Faces of Dr. T that Dr. Seuss made, but it's not really the same thing.
Is that any good? Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
It's all right. It's not as good as Mary Poppins. I wished it would have been made the way it would have been when Walt was alive. Pete's Dragon, the woman lead in that, she was Helen Reddy who did the song I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, and she's in this Disney movie.
All right, where to next, Edward?
It's the film after, or the folder of the films after Mary Poppins. I'm just going to zip through them like we did that other one.
Okay.
The first one's That Darn Cat, and that's about the FBI. They get involved when this cat is the only one that knows where this kidnapped bank teller is being held hostage. And it was based on a book called Undercover Cat. And Walt heard about it before the book was published. And this was the first film with Dean Jones. Robert Stevenson, the director, said it was his favorite film he ever directed. It was one of the biggest hits of the year. Walt considered a sequel, but he died, and the FBI had a lot of stuff in the folder about this film because it's about the FBI, and J. Edgar Hoover didn't like that. Those Callaways was a drama about a man who wants to turn a lake into a sanctuary for geese, and these developers want to hunt the geese there. And it was filmed in New England, but some of it was filmed in New England. It was set in New England. But they, to do the trees in California, they painted the tree leaves with molasses, and then they painted paint on it. I don't have anything to say about that one. It's one of his Indian stories.
Boy Eagle, okay.
That's another Indian story. Just read the top there, the headline there.
What does it say here? Run, Appaloosa Run. It says, yep. Your heart will ride with this Indian girl and that incredible stallion called Holy Smoke.
But Walt was a racist. He's doing all these Indian movies.
Right.
Mio and the Detectives is about a boy that's robbed on his way to his grandmother's house, and he lists all these kids to help him solve the crime and catch the thieves. Gallagher is about a news reporter that goes on he solves mysteries, and that's because Walt had been a news reporter, and that's it was a TV series. That was the intro for it. Fighting Prince of Donganal, that was one of those historical epics that was filmed in the British Isles. Lieutenant Robinson Crusoe, that's loosely based on Robinson Crusoe. That's the only time Walt got a screen credit as a story by, and he got credited as Yen Sid. It's Disney backwards. And in that one, it satirizes naval regulations.
Oh, nice.
Walt was always skeptical of bureaucratic government. This is from 4 episodes of his TV show. It was called Kilroy. It was about a Vietnam vet assimilating back into everyday life. This is Follow Me, Boys. This was about Fred McMurray settles in a small town and he builds a life there. It's kind of like Walt's version of It's a Wonderful Life. He becomes a scoutmaster. The climax of the movie, all the generations of the boys he mentored come and they throw a parade in his honor because the Boy Scouts are going to force him out because he's too old. The Love of Willa Dean, that's about a city boy that moves to the country and he has small town adventures. That's a photo from it. That's Bill Mumy there on the left there. He was in all the, the kid in the cornfield and everything. Ugly Dotson's about a married couple and their conflict with their dogs. And it was a comedy. I think it was a successful one. It was the last movie Charlie Ruggles was in. He passed away. He always played an old man in a lot of these movies. Young Dick Turpin, that's a story about a Robin Hood figure, real life figure. And he does Robin Hood things to fight an evil lord who's confiscating the farms, land of the townspeople. Monkeys Go Home, we mentioned on the episode with Walt's patriotism. But the girl that's in this, they were going to be in the Love Bug. And that's from the original proposal poster for the Love Bug. She was going to be his co-star in that. Adventures of Bull Griffin, that's a comedy about the California Gold Rush. Roddy McDowell's a butler. Carl Malden is the villain. Judge Higgins. Ward Kimball did a lot of editing of the footage on this, so it's almost like a cartoon in the editing. This film, I never heard of this film until I was going to colleges to see where it was going to go, and they had the Disney Channel, and I stayed up till 4 a.m. to see how this movie turned out. I liked it. Happiest Millionaire, this was the final major production Walt made. It was the follow-up to Mary Poppins. He died before it was released. And this was about the daughter getting married, and that's because he saw himself in Fred McMurray, and that was the story. And the reason that they blame it didn't win is because it wasn't successful. It was Vietnam. That's when he overheard the Sherman Brothers singing the lyric FOB, and he thought it was SOB. And he said, we don't have the word SOB in a Disney film. So someone drew a storyboard. The Gnome-Mobile, that's about a millionaire grandfather, Lumber King, and his 2 grandchildren, and they come upon a gnome and they help him find a wife. And some of the concepts that he was originally going to do in Darby O'Gill, like have the actor that's playing the grandfather playing the gnome, that was going to be a Darby O'Gill idea, but he didn't do it in Darby O'Gill, but he did it in this. This one used blue screen instead of the forced perspective.
The Gnome-Mobile.
That's the real Gnome-Mobile today in a museum somewhere. Now, and coming up here, I have a photo, and see there's a publicity photo with the gnomes sitting in Walt's chair, but I've got one where Iwerks is on set. Now that's the woman on the far left, right there. She was the body double for Haley Mills in The Parent Trap.
Okay.
But there's another fantasy comedy. Now that's Iwerks on the bottom left, and then the Walt's up there on the upper right, and they had to figure out how to do this trick with the blue screen to make it all in focus. Now, the one and only original Genuine Family Band, this is the movie that Kurt Russell met Goldie Hawn on. But
cool.
She was 10 years older than him. The backdrop is the Grover Cleveland Benjamin Harrison race, where the Electoral College came into play for the first time.
Wait a minute. I got to write this down. Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And the grandfather's a Democrat and all the rest of the family is Republican. And that's where the conflict of the story is.
That is so great.
And well, Bob Sherman's son always objects that the grandfather fought in the Civil War and was a Confederate. And I think it's a positive thing that that's part of the story where the country's healing together, but they act like, well, that's unforgivable because of slavery. But the country had to come together after that. And this is just a second before I get to Blackbeard's Ghost. This is a line in that movie, the Family Band. All I realize is the Democrats elect a president and the Republicans cheat them out of it. And Wally Cox says that. And that sounds like them today when the Electoral College comes into play. Blackbeard's Ghost, that was a movie where Dean Jones conjures up the legendary pirate in the 20th century, and they embark on breaking his curse. And it's a funny movie. It's not what it would have been if Walt was alive.
Mm-hmm.
Never a dull moments about a down on his luck actor mistaken for an assassin in a heist. The Horse in the Gray Flannel Suit, that's about an ad executive whose daughter wants a horse, so he figures out an ad campaign with a horse in it. A Smith, that's about a lawyer who defends an American Indian. Charlie the Lonesome Cougar is just Adventures of a Cougar. And same with this. I just want people to be aware there's all these movies.
So many movies. How many? Okay, again, I'm going to put Ed on the spot.
I don't know how many he made.
No, I mean, I would love to know how many movies the entire existence of the Walt Disney Company have been made.
Well, it depends on how they're going to classify a movie and if they're hiding it or not. Because some of the things he did for television were, they would be only a half hour or 45 minutes or whatever, and then they put them out as a little featurette. And the next folders, we just zip right through them just so people are aware. It shouldn't take that long.
We got the Love Bug, right?
Well, yeah, we can do the Love Bug and then go show everything that's in there.
Oh, okay. My bad. Did I go to the wrong folder?
No, you're in the right folder. I'm not thinking clearly here.
Ed's been up all night getting ready for today's show.
All week.
Yeah.
Well, look, I had to track all these images down, plus all these little write-ups.
You've been up for over 24 hours, people should know.
Yeah, I have. I'm doing fine. Now, Walt, this was the last major movie Walt started, so this is why I put it in this folder, because it came out in 1969. Original title was called Carboy Girl. Some of the other titles they considered was The Magic Volksy, The Runaway Wagon, Beetle Bomb, Wonder Beetle, Bug-a-Boom, and Thunderbug. They finally settled on the Love Bug. To cast the Love Bug as the car. Now, the number 53 is because it was Bill Walsh's favorite baseball player's number. And now this here, the 53 is missing on the door, and they always use that in the publicity shots, and somehow nobody noticed it. The 53 is supposed to be on the door. That's the baseball player. I have his name here. Don Drysdale of the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's why Herbie's 53. So there's a Jeopardy question for you.
Yeah, he also was in an episode of the Brady Bunch, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
I can't remember. It's been so long since I've seen those. I have the DVD, but I don't.
I remember it was a Dodgers pitcher. I can't remember. Maybe somebody in the comments can remind me which pitcher made a cameo in Brady Bunch.
The reason they chose a Volkswagen is because they had all these cars parked on the Disney lot for a casting call, and people would come kick the tires and things on the other cars, but on the Volkswagen, they'd talk to it, they'd hug it, things like that. So they made it into a character. Dean Jones was the hippie there. So great. Now this is how they did Herbie skipping over the water. That's why I wanted to show this. That's a car, and it's on a crane, and then they had to lower it. The hard part was when it would touch the water, it would shake back and forth most of the time. They spent like 3 weeks doing that. It's only a shot that's 4 seconds in the movie.
Incredible.
Now, they have the movie, they say the woke people don't like it because of the Chinese guy in the movie, because he's a smart Asian and he has all these businesses. But that's funny. He came to America and he embraced the American way of life, and he's a capitalist. And everywhere you go in this movie, he owns the different businesses and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, remember those people that were carrying him like a rickshaw? Those are all of his nieces and nephews. They probably object to that. Now, this was when they were filling the gas tank of the old Chinese grandfather. He's taking his time, so David Tomlinson doesn't get back in the race, and the other people are tending to Herbie. And then you see at the end that that's the gag. It's another Woo Enterprise. And there's another Woo Enterprise. He ends up with the car dealership. and this was, I put this near so you can see how much the gas was in 1969. And I also have one here of how much a Volkswagen was in 1974. $24.99. And this was the most successful movie that Disney made up till Eisner. It did even better than Mary Poppins. This was a famous photo they took of them, to advertise. This really happened. They did 3 sequels. I have the posters of those coming up here too. Herbie Rides Again. That was still the original director's producer and everything. They worked on that one. They didn't work on the other sequels. Herbie Goes Bananas and Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. There was also a Herbie television series in the early 80s. It only had like 5 episodes. But Dean Jones was back for that. No, what if you got time? What's remaining? We just zip through them, and
Let's
people can
see.
see all the posters.
Okay.
Because I don't have notes on any of this stuff. It's just if you remember them, we can just say anything. But
Let me see here.
I think there's two folders left. There's one that's after Walt, and then there's the folder that's the animal films.
Okay, so I'm going to After Walt now.
Yeah, go to after Walt.
Okay.
We'll just zip right through them. And the ones at the beginning of the folder, you can see how they were still trying to do the fantasy kind of films that Walt was making when he was alive. They weren't as good as the ones that Walt made, but there was still an attempt to keep that going. That's a funny one, Snowball Express, if no one's ever seen that. And the Boatniks was like the summer film to that. Escape to Witch Mountain. There was a sequel to that. Return to Witch Mountain, something like that. Yeah, Return from Witch Mountain. That's a Western, The Wild Country. That wasn't bad. $1 Million Duck. Castaway Cowboy, that stars James Garner. Freaky Friday.
They remade that one
Several times.
Oh.
The James Garner ones, they're banned. He did this one, won the Linnea, and that one kind of went out of print on DVD. But that's before he did the Rockford Files. And there it was re-released with Uncle Remus was re-released with that. Charlie and the Angel, that one was all right. Apple Dumpling Gang. I don't know how many of these are on Disney Plus, but these are all the movies that I've got most of them here from the 70s. But that one, a lot of people really like North Avenue Irregulars. Child of Glass, no one remembers that one, but they used to play that every Halloween. Cat from Outer Space. It wasn't as good as I remembered. I saw that one as an adult. It was, well, when you're a kid, you have a nice memory of some of these films. That one doesn't hold up to me.
Uh-huh.
I guess I had that in there twice. Scandalous John, we mentioned that before. Bill Walsh's favorite. That one's banned in America. One of our dinosaurs is missing. I don't know how I got those out of order, but I did.
That's fine.
Run, Cougar, Run, another one of the animal movies. King of the Grizzlies. Candle Shoes, a really decent one there. That was going to be done by the director of David Swift there, and they fired him on it. And Super Dad is Bob Crane. You remember Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes? I think he got murdered after that movie. I think that was the last movie Kurt Russell was in, was Super Dad. One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing is banned in the U.S. I had to get a DVD from England to have a copy. I've never seen that one. That one's pretty good. An Island on Top of the World. That's kind of like the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of a film, but it's not none of these are as good as the ones when Walt was alive.
Right.
But it was all the same people making them, but there was no one there leading each film to what it was going to be. And a lot of these started under Walt because he bought up the rights to all these different projects. They just got developed after he'd passed away. World's Greatest Athlete, that one's probably banned too because there's a witch doctor in that movie.
I loved that when I was a kid, but yeah. I bet it's just like you said.
Yeah,
if I went back and watched it now, probably not good. Because I mean, it was corny when I watched it as a kid, but I still liked it.
Well, I mean, you know what you were getting with the films at that time, and you think about it.
It's a donkey, and he's a kicker for a football team.
People complain that they weren't making films that were confronting what was going on at the times, but that's not why people went to Disney movies.
Right.
They were going there for a distraction. You could trust the kids at the movies, you know, that they would send their kids to the movie alone. Even Southern Baptists who didn't go to movie theaters, they would let their kids go to see Walt Disney movies.
Sure.
I mean, it was a whole different time. And
how many movies did Don Knotts make for Disney?
I think at least 4. And then he did that movie with Tim Conway, and they also did a movie that wasn't a Disney movie in the 80s. It was The Private Eyes.
Right, and that movie he did with you just said it.
Tim Conway?
Yes, is The Prize Fighter. And I know that because my mom was in that.
Oh yeah? Was she an extra or?
Yeah. She's in the very last scene when they all swarm the boxing ring.
Well, I just remembered a joke that's probably not PC that was in the Private Eyes. It's a crime thing like Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
You can open the animal one there, and I'll just tell the story.
Oh, right.
There's a Chinese servant in the house, and he greets Don Knotts. So. And Don Knotts, that's one of his takes. He goes, "What did you call me?"
Oh, nice. Okay. I got it.
Well, that's old kind of humor there, you know.
Yeah.
Now, these are all the animal films. Most of them don't have a poster. They're just the stills of the show they were on with Walt's episodes there. And one of the links we have, a lot of these are posted there on that YouTube channel, so you can go look them up and see them if you want to.
Yeah. And a little bit, we will add the links in the description.
Later today.
Be looking for that.
But why aren't all these movies on Disney Plus? That's my. I mean, these are animal movies. That's why they don't want them there, because it's antiquated in their eyes, animal movies. But they're historical.
Mm-hmm.
Sammy the Wrong Way Seal. I remember that title, but I've never seen that movie. I think the dog is Bristol Face.
Okay.
Now, a lot of these were put out on video in the 80s. That's what a lot of these images are, the VHS covers where you'd go to rent them in a video store.
Okay.
But I've never seen them on DVD or anything. I mean, that's a fan-made DVD there, but that's all I could find for an image of the movie. A lot of these have similar titles, I've noticed. Like there's one about the Wrong Way Eagle or something, and this is always an animal name, and it describes what it is. The $1 Million Caller. And it was also known, that's the same film. It was known as Hector as well. And I don't know what, I've never seen that one. I could only find that's a book that was a tie-in. Same with that one. That has Ron Howard in that.
I see that.
And there's Ron Howard was in several movies for them in the 70s. But none of them were, caught on. These are all the, Greta the Misfit Greyhound, Joker the Amul. Is it Ocelot?
Ocelot or Ocelot.
I'm not even sure what an Ocelot is.
Words you don't say every day, right?
Yeah. The pigeon that worked a miracle.
The pigeon that worked. I mean, tells you what you're gonna get.
Sancho the Homecoming Steer. Ida the Offbeat Eagle. I mean, they all have similar titles, but Walt had a team where they would go off making these movies on their own in other countries.
Good stuff, man. Did we get through all of the stuff today?
Yeah, we did, but we had to rush through all those. I'm glad we did, because I wanted those all to be there so people know everything that was made by Walt and the people that worked with Walt after he'd passed away. Because that stuff's not woke. It might not all be entertaining to an adult, but it's not woke. Well,
nice job, Ed. So you got us through today's episode. Remember now, this is part 10. So if you've missed any of the previous 9, they're in this playlist available to you. Don't forget the supporting links that Ed has provided in the description. And please share this playlist with anybody you think needs to see this history and just kind of absorb it. And bookmark this. And please don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications so that you are alerted when we go live with or add any kind of content. Okay, so part 11, a week from today at 11 a.m. Eastern, right here, more Disney Legends. And then a week following on March 23rd, we'll wrap up with our 12-part series here from Ed.
Rediscovering Walt Disney.
Walt Disney.
Because a lot of people were writing me the Rediscovering Walt Disney, so that had to be the title for the last one. I'm glad.
I love it.
I've been rediscovering Walt Disney too.
I love it. Very good. Okay, so the next time you'll see me here on this channel will be Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern with another Friday live stream. Ed, anything else here before we part until next time?
I'm just glad we got through all the notes for a change.
Yeah. I think people don't realize that oftentimes we just kind of run out of time.
Yeah, but I'll get them worked in before we're done. There's not that. Yeah, I've been doing it right along.
Yeah, we won't miss anything. We'll eventually get to it. Okay, Ed McCray. Don't forget to follow him You're always posting great stuff at real_ed_McCray over on Twitter, X. I am at Keith Malinak. As you can see, our handles on the screen here. If you have any questions, please tag Ed on Twitter. You're very interactive there,
Yep.
and you provide great information over there as well. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, whether on YouTube, whether you're on Twitter, wherever you're following us. We appreciate it a lot, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.